attend. Oop, nope, I lied. We don't attend yet. I did forget another thing. Oh no. I got a disturbed library that was like, no, don't do it. Sorry, kitty, I need this blanket. Poor library. Nobody never let he sleep. Nobody never let he sleep correctly. Donate your money. Donate your money to the Let Library Sleep Correctly Fund so I can have a little better sound treatment. Speaking of sound treatment, it's another thing I almost forgot to do. Just eat this off. There we go. Now we're ready. Attend, O reader, our tale of wonder. Welcome back to Paper Cuts, everybody, where last time we started in on Wearing the Cape by Marion G. Harmon, which I would love to point out we are reading by author permission. That's right, we've stepped out of the public domain, which doesn't happen all too often around here. And we found that developing superpowers really changes the course of your life. You know, you don't get to be the sorority girl you were planning on. You know, you had this whole thing planned with, like, becoming a specific the head of a specific sorority over the course of 4 years. When, surprise, you almost die in an overpass bombing, and now you're a superhero, and you're one of the strongest superheroes in your area. Uh-oh. That's a real left turn for your life to take. And double surprise, your dad has been a superhero this whole time, one of the reservists that handles natural disasters. So, you're really in for it. Not to mention that the prototypical superhero, the Superman stand-in, if you will, is the lead of the team that you have just joined. You're really having a great time. You being Astra, the main character. So, with that nutshell for thoroughly shoved around our story. Oh, yeah, I almost forgot to mention, you've been contacted by a time traveler who is trying to stop their evil duplicate from doing evil duplicate things. That's a that's a twist that gets unpacked later. Let's dive into chapter 13, shall we? Life would be so much better if it were like the series, but then I'd be taller, too. Astra, notes from a life. This is something I forgot to note the last time we were reading this book. They open with notes from fictional books in universe. Anyway, the world of TV and the movies is not the real world. I offer this ridiculously obvious truism only as a defense of my ignorance. Shelley and I got most of our information about superheroes from Hollywood and television, with the details filled in by Hero Beat and Power Week, both breathless fan mags. After Shelley died, my exposure mostly came from news items which could generally be summed up as bad things are happening. And bad things, they're always happening, somewhere, but even the entire Chicago area with its nearly 8 million souls is only a small part of somewhere. Add the fact that Chicago has the Sentinels plus 7 other crisis aid and intervention teams and half a dozen superhuman agencies like the Crew filling various needs. Well, the city has over 100 card-carrying capes. Most of them are street-level, one-trick superheroes, but every CAI seems to have an Atlas or Ajax type to help handle accidents, fires, and other civil emergencies, which we do far more often than we fight supervillains. So, in my first week of training and flying patrols with Atlas, we averaged only 1 or 2 emergencies a day. What kind of emergencies? Well, on Monday, we removed a downed power line that blocked a major roadway, and I actually retrieved a cat from a tree. Dispatch really only grabbed the call since it was my first day and a cute photo op, but I framed the article. Wednesday, we responded to an apartment fire, flying down and quickly searching through the smoke and flames for victims as fire trucks raced to the scene. Since it started upstairs during work hours and the alarms worked fine, we didn't find any. On Thursday, dispatch sent us into a bad freeway accident. We flew the paramedics in and flew the victims to the hospital, even moving the cars off the road. Who knew there was a science to lifting cars? You can't just grab them by the bumper. You gotta tie them up or you gotta tip them up and lift by the frames. Oh good, we're still alive. I saw the lights flicker for a second and I panicked. Friday, we weren't called up at all, though, of course, bad things happened that other CAIs and normal emergency service providers handled. On Wednesday of the same week, I accompanied Atlas to the ribbon cutting for the Southside Power Station, the city's new nuclear power plant. American Power put on a show for the flagship station of their new line of thorium-fueled clean power plants, and Quentin thought the addition of my cute sidekickness to the event would be good PR for the team. It was actually kind of fun, to her credit. In all, the first week passed relatively quietly, but in week 2, we responded to 2 superhuman incidents. Interesting little world building note that they're using thorium powered reactors. It makes you wonder how much the effects of the briefly mentioned Verne style heroes who develop technology have had upon the world, because Chicago having a nuclear reactor, no, wouldn't happen in the normal world that we know of. At least the Chicago that I know wouldn't have a nuclear reactor, not in the middle of town. Sure, they had a particle accelerator in the 80s, but that's a whole different beast. Did you know that, by the way? That's a thing. They had a small particle accelerator at University of Chicago. Anyway, on Tuesday night, we got called in on a domestic disturbance. Dispatch fed us his file as we flew, telling us all about Eric Ludlow, a B-class Ajax type. An Army reservist and veteran of the China War, he was a member of the crew, codenamed Gantry. I remembered seeing him on my first flight last Monday. He was also very, very drunk. Not the best idea when you're an Atlas or Ajax type, given that you're always operating heavy machinery. We landed in his yard to find him standing on the front porch of his old brick wraparound, barefoot in jeans and a stained athletic shirt, and yelling at the police who stood on the sidewalk. A large hole in the front window and a very dead TV lying in the gutter all the way across the street told us part of the story. Dispatch told us the rest. A neighbor walking by had narrowly escaped being struck by the flying TV, apparently launched because Ludlow's team lost. A local unit responded, ascertained the obvious, and sensibly called for backup. "Good evening, Mr. Ludlow," I said as soon as we touched down. After a week sparring with Ajax, more scary than I could say, and Atlas, even scarier, Atlas felt I could handle a B-class easily enough and thought I might be able to defuse the situation. We should send in the girl who might remind him of his kid sister instead of the dude who'll just add to the testosterone, were his exact words. I wasn't at all sure myself, but the difference between A-class and B-class meant in the worst possible outcome, I wasn't the one getting hurt. The big guy focused on me. "Get him out of here." I smiled and waved at the patrolman. "You can go now. Thanks." They looked skeptical. "Miss, I don't think that's a good idea." Confident that Atlas would handle them, I aimed my friendliest smile at Mr. Ludlow and tried to look calm while a brief argument went on behind my back. A moment later, I heard the squad car pull away, and I was sure it wouldn't go far. "Are we all right now, Mr. Ludlow?" He thought about it for a moment, and then jerked a nod. "Damn busybodies, always asking questions." 3 previous disturbances, Dispatch whispered. All just yelling. "They just worry about your neighbors. No harm in that, is there?" He stepped off the porch, and I made myself step closer. The closer we were, the more naturally we could talk, and the more normal the situation would seem. He already looked calmer. "Now, but they shouldn't have called you. Bunch of nuts." "You're right." I nodded. "No reason to get so worked up." "That was a good TV, too," he said, mournfully looking past me. Then I heard the dying whoop of another squad car pulling in and nearly closed my eyes. "Well, how?" "Hey, I said get out of here!" Ludlow yelled, lunging past me, completely ignoring me to head for the street. He couldn't toss a tank, but he could throw a police cruiser, so I was out of options. Turn, foot to the back of his knee, hand to forearm, sliding down to his wrist as he tumbled past. Lean in and push, add to his own momentum as he went down, just like Ajax drilled me. He smacked his front walk hard enough to spread spiderweb cracks, and before he could recover, I had my knee in his back and his right arm locked behind him. Shh, it's all right, Eric, I whispered softly, patting his shoulder with my free hand, stunned to be pinning a man 3 times my weight. Silly, I know. He yelled something I didn't quite catch and tried to push off with his left, but I wasn't letting us go anywhere. I braced myself, refusing to move, sort of the reverse of flying, and the walk beneath us gave a sharp crack when he tried to push off of it. Shh, I repeated, and he slumped and started to cry. We just stayed there, me crooning to him, until a patrolman brought us up some titanium blacklock security cuffs. With Atlas helping, we got his wrists and ankles snapped into them by the time the special paddy wagon arrived. They took him in and charged him with drunk and disorderly conduct, and after that I heard he went into rehab. All in all, my first real super fight could hardly be called the stuff movies were made of. And then my second fight almost made me quit. Chapter 14. Supervillain culture worships power. By definition, a supervillain is strong enough to do what he wants, and lawbreaking is a display of strength. Fans of villain rap and fashion are attracted to what it represents: total self-empowerment, a challenge to the system. Because superheroes stand for the system, they and supervillains are literally Homeric enemies, like Hector and Achilles of old. Professor Charles Gibbons on The New Heroic Age. The alarm caught me in the middle of a dream that put Atlas in costume stretched out on my bed with a shiver-inducing smile on his face. That woke me up enough to realize he shouldn't be there, and I rolled over and off the bed with a little scream as I went over the edge. Hitting the floor woke me the rest of the way. What was that about? Where was I? Slow-firing neurons told me I was in my room in the dome. I'd stayed up late on my webcam with Julie. She'd asked if Atlas was as yummy up close as he looked on TV, a question that might have influenced the trajectory of my dreams, and I'd fallen asleep studying Barlow's Guide to Superhumans. I hadn't been asleep that long. Clock said it wasn't quite midnight. Rolling to my feet, I snatched up my earbud and fumbled it on. The instant I switched it on, a coffee-driven voice started an info dump. Last night, a couple of brothers were killed by a sanguinary. 5 minutes ago, someone called in a fight shaping up at Southside. The Brotherhood and the Sanguinary boys are going to war. So, not good, in a nutshell. Stripping off my sleep set, I scrambled for my costume and a rest kit while he started in on a description of both groups. Although I'd pretty much ignored the superhero scene, I hadn't been able to ignore the new supervillain trend. Cause-driven supervillains appeared practically the day of the event, along with professional villains who liked using their powers to rob banks, armored cars, commit burglary, and the rare psychotic villains and high-profile thrill-seeking villains for whom it was all a game, but for the past few years, an honest-to-God supervillain culture had been growing. Superpowers aren't always a ticket to success. A lot of powers are only useful in combat or other specialized situations, and some there's just no legitimate use for. And then there are superhumans who just don't play well with others and aren't interested in going the public service route. It's also become a minority issue. Less superheroes work for the man, the system. If you do, you're a sellout. Add in the rise of supervillain rappers like Freak Show, and supervillains have turned into what Ajax calls a new subculture called Style Tribe. A lot of them are simply fashion villains. Supervillain fashion right now is jeans, leather pants, leather jacket or duster, and a bright-colored shirt with a symbol hand-painted on it. Tats or face paint, optional. But the seriously hardcore believe you aren't a supervillain till you bag your own superhero. Bagged as in killed. I was so not ready for this. Okay, so we're looking at, this is contemporaneous, I'm picturing, the era of superheroes this is set in, and it's relatively contemporaneous to when the book was published, 2011. You think about, the simple costumes, the more, half civvies costumes of the late 2000s you're thinking about, this was probably being written at the time that, say, Connor Kent Superboy, the one with the jacket and And the spikes and the Superman T-shirt. The one that probably would have been by had he been written 10 years later. That's the type of thing I'm picturing with these basic supervillains. Anyway, I'm ready for this, I said, still adjusting the kit on the back of my belt. I'd been the third to arrive in the assembly room, even beating Rush. No, you're not, Ajax said. Atlas looked up. But she's coming anyway. Media's gonna be all over this one. She's gotta show willing. Across the table, I saw the Harlequin nod and Chakra shake her head. We're not discussing this. We gotta be in the saddle. Our source puts the Sanguinary boys here. He tapped the tabletop projection, showing a gutted warehouse on Cottage Grove and 11th Street, just south of the old Pullman clock tower. Currently wishing I had paid a little more attention to the geography of Chicago. I've been to Chicago a great many times. I mean, it's only 3 hours from my hometown, but they're naming specific streets and areas, and I'm like, is this contemporaneous to actual Chicago? Anyway, the Brotherhood's headed in their direction, moving fast, but not putting out scouts, so it's obviously prearranged. Southside Guardians can't handle this themselves. Their source counts 9 brothers, 12 boys. Guardians are down once, they're bringing 4. Mallory, Scarlet, Killjoy, and Sprints. He looked up again. Rush, move now. I want you on your bike and in position in 5. And Rush was gone, off on the Rushmobile. I'd learned Rush didn't really move faster than the rest of us. He just sped up his own subjective time until he was living at a rate of 10 seconds per second of real time. When he really wanted to get somewhere fast, he'd jump the wall, taking his gear-laden motorcycle into hypertime, where no time passed in the real-time world. Of course, he had to drop back into real time to fight, since he couldn't affect a real-time world at all from there. No other Guardian teams? Ajax asked. The other CAI teams could have easily added as many as 40 more heroes to the fight. Nope, don't need them. Don't want to look like we need them. You read the files. 4, 5 A-class bad guys tops. CVD will be bringing the wagons, but we move in first. There's going to be a lot of power thrown around in there. Ajax nodded. Formation? Nimbus, take support. Chakra there in spirit, darling? She nodded and glided from the room. Ajax, we'll bomb them. Quinn, same with Astra. Blackstone, could you give us some subtle multipliers? Phantom doubles went down well last time. Scout the action. Let us know if there are any surprises. Blackstone saluted theatrically with his cane, disappearing with a swirl of opera cape and a puff of fragrant smoke. Any questions? He looked around at the rest of us. Then let's go. The assembly room's elevator took us to the bay, and we launched, with the exception of Nimbus, who had no dimmer switch and would stand out in the night sky like a deorbiting satellite. As fast as she could travel, she'd catch up with us when the time came. Atlas lifted Ajax with a one-hand grip by an unobtrusive handle. Atlas lifted Ajax with a one-handed grip by an unobtrusive handle on his armored back for just such occasions, and Quinn perched on my shoulders, which had to look a bit ridiculous considering our size difference. We flew in a high arc over Chicago. Astra, Atlas whispered in my ear through our dispatch link. Quinn's gonna dismount in the middle of the fight, and I want you to go for the boy's biggest Ajax type. His name's Brick, clever enough. He's bald as an egg, be wearing an orange brick-tiled coat. Mid-A class, so he can take anything you dish out without breaking, but you should be up for him. Nimbus will keep anyone off your back while you're busting him. Translation? Nimbus will nail the guy if you can't. I nodded, then realized that wouldn't work. Got it. I could feel my heartbeat high in my throat, but my voice was steady enough. And that was it. Atlas refined his instructions to the others as we flew, and he got reports from Rush and Blackstone. We slowed down, flying wide over Lake Michigan. Why? The show had to be starting in a minute. My nerves stretched thinner, but we flew even slower until finally Atlas called out again. Boys and girls, it's time to be rude. Go. And we got. Chicago's 2 supervillain gangs had decided to meet in an old abandoned warehouse. Must have been a regular meeting place, maybe even an arena, because someone had thoughtfully rigged the place for lights, which made target acquisition easy for everyone as we dropped on them. Leaping off my shoulders, Quinn did a triple somersault as she dropped through the old building's ceiling ribs. Ajax just dropped, released like a targeted kinetic bomb. I can do this. Remember, Mr. Ludlow? Find Brick and the fight. Right. They'd started the fight without us, but I spotted Brick easily and went for the direct approach. I landed on him, Atlas's advice from our sparring matches echoing in my ears. Forget your size, don't be fancy. Let your toughness protect you while you hit him hard. End it as fast as you can. I came in feet first, right between his shoulder blades, pushing him into the ground. Grabbing an arm, I threw him through the inner wall to separate him from the crowd and then went through the hole after him. I wanted some room to swing a brick without accidentally hitting someone more fragile. Brick was already pumped up, and surprised or not, he showed me how fast he could move. I found him rolling to his feet and kept going, right into him. He didn't bother to dodge, just swung his huge fists in a whistling haymaker. With too much momentum, I couldn't slide by, so now I tumbled. But Ajax hit harder in training. I smacked the ground in a correct fall and bounced to my feet, shaking it off. Okay, surprise over. Brick grinned. Awesome, I'm gonna get my hero. Then he charged. I didn't fly, my nerves disappeared into a thrill I'd never felt before. Step and turn, duck inside his reach, foot to the back of his knee, help him fall down hard with a hand to the back of his head to make it harder. Worked with Mr. Ludlow, and it worked with Brick. He smacked down so hard that concrete chips flew up like water droplets from a mud puddle, and the warehouse floor bounced under my feet. He went loose, stunned, and I grabbed an arm and pulled it behind him, intending to cuff him before he could recover. Then a crystalline fog of water particles condensed out of the night air around me, and I could feel my core temperature dropping. It felt like a horrible sliding chill you get when you slurp down a milkshake too fast, but with my whole body. My heart seemed to slow as my blood tried to freeze. My vision fogged up as my eyes iced over, but I saw a guy in a white duster, spiked and frosted hair, climb through the hole, laughing. Whoa, it's our new golden girl. I got mine, but I'll trade up. I scrambled up, but Brick grabbed my leg and pulled me to the ground. I kicked and rolled over, but he wouldn't let go. Where was Nimbus? I was scrabbling in the rubble. I couldn't get away from Brick, but the cryokinetic was the one killing me. My questing hand found a chunk of concrete, and I twisted, made a hardball pitch at Whitehead's center of mass. I hit his arm, heard the crack, and he screamed. My vision started clearing. I kicked Brick in the face hard enough to snap his head back, but I was too weak. He grunted, but didn't let go, pulling me under him and closing his free hand in an iron claw around my throat. Forgetting all technique, I tore at his tightening grip. Then, from nowhere, I smelled Chakra's jasmine scent, felt her reassurance. Warmth bloomed deep inside me, like a flower opening to spill liquid sunlight instead of taking it in, and strength flowed back as the chill at my core melted. I kicked again. Halfway under him now, I caught a very vulnerable spot, and he screamed falsetto. Good to know Brick had stones. He let go, curling into a fetal position, and I shot out from under him to land with intent on Whitehead. The cryokinetic screamed again when his broken arm hit the cement. Reaching behind me, I pulled out 2 of my 3 sets of police ties and quickly clipped his wrists behind him, then got his ankles. Don't go anywhere. Can always break the other one. Standing, I looked through the hole just in time for Rush to poke his head in. You done in here? 'Cause I'm torn between watching and participating. Behind him, I could see the fight winding down. Supervillains littered the ground, sitting or lying down while our guys moved through the mess, dispensing more ties. 12 of us to 21 of them, and we'd kick their asses. I went back and flipped a whimpering Brick over on his stomach. Hands, I said, still breathing hard. He stretched them out, and I slapped the titanium thumb cuffs on him. Then I started shaking so bad I had to sit down. Brick unfolded a little. First real fight? I nodded. Well, shit. The special paddy wagons rolled in with the paramedics and the media tag-alongs, and the Chicago Police Department took it from there. We returned to the dome, and I went straight to the infirmary. Dr. Beth wanted to make sure having my core temperature temporarily dropped way below even hypothermia levels hadn't done me any lasting harm. Also, did they just use... Sorry, rewinding for a second. They just used, like, standard police-issue plastic zip ties on a cryokinetic? Plastic is incredibly brittle at low temperature. I mean, he's got a broken arm, so obviously he can't channel very well. So, like, you know, it's handled. But, like, had you not disabled the guy hard enough, that would not hold him in any way, shape, or form. Do you know how fragile, like, nylon zip ties are when you get them cold? They shatter so easy. Sorry, like, I shouldn't nitpick the technique here. She is, an amateur. But, like, it sounds like it's standard issue. Again, he's got a broken arm. He's not going to be able to focus to channel any. So it's like, it's not that big of a deal, but it stood out to me when I first read it, and it stood out to me now. Like, but I digress. I could nitpick, but I'm not going to. Although, honestly, while I'm off topic, all of these, like, classification types, they're like, oh yeah, it's an Atlas type, an Ajax type, a Vern type. I'm like, so, like, it's making me think about the tabletop RPG that's based in this setting, and I'm like, does that explain the broad strokes of each of these types? Because, like, we know what Atlas is, right? We haven't seen a lot of Ajax. Like, I assume it's more of a, like, invulnerable but not incredibly, like, it's more of a, like, invulnerable and incredibly strong but not, like, flight based and, like, sense expanding. It's more of a, like, you're just kind of a big, for lack of a better term here, given who we just saw, a brick of a guy who just kind of is tough. I'm picturing kind of like a little bit of an homage to the Thing almost. You know what I mean? Anyway, I digress. Let's get back to the book. Chakra visited me there. Yes, she had been there in spirit and had been responsible for the burst of energy that turned it around for me. She believed her powers came from tantric sex magic, but I didn't care if she thought they came from eating clownfish. Nimbus dropped by to apologize. She got hit in the opening round, and by the time she'd refocused on me, my fight had been over. Seconds are all it takes, after all. She was very upset, but I told her we were good. I needed to learn sign language. Nimbus heard sound with her whole photonic body, but couldn't talk, so Chakra translated for me. She didn't speak, didn't eat or drink, couldn't touch. Didn't seem right to me. Then Atlas dropped by to debrief me. I'm very good at hiding my feelings, but after a few minutes he firmly pushed everyone out the door and closed it. You've got very aggressive instincts, he said, turning back to me. Oak Park High Field Hockey, MVP. And he studied me for a long moment. And you're a cool one. Fit to be tired, no conniptions. Reckon you got something to say to me? Why did we do that? Do what? Don't act stupid. After pulling myself together, I'd gone back through the hole in the wall with my prisoners to help with the cleanup, and I wasn't going to close my eyes again tonight. I kept seeing Dice Man, a brother, lying in far too many pieces. I suppressed a near hysterical giggle. He'd been diced. We could have shut that fight down before it started. My voice shook. Nimbus could have blinded half of them in a flash. Rush could have tased everybody Nimbus didn't blind. Blackstone could have flooded the building with fog while you and I went through with infrared vision and cuffed everybody still standing. There's got to be a dozen ways we could have done it. Nobody needed to get hurt. Nobody needed to die. He gave me a pitying look like he was about to tell me there was no Santa. Now, there you're wrong. Why? If we'd shut it down before it started, taken them all in, what would have happened? 3 of them would still be alive, and Sprints wouldn't be in the hospital. The Guardians had waited to go in until we got there, and hadn't been as lucky as us. You're right. And then? I just looked back at him. Where was he going with this? How long would they have stayed off the street? They lawyered up, claimed they were there for a friendly meeting, been out in a day. Stopping the fight, easy. Shutting them down, whole different thing. So we waited till there was blood on the ground and gave them plenty of room to kick up fuss. I shook my head. Tell me we didn't wait for someone to die. I could, but then I'd be lying. Still wish we could have waited longer. No, we're heroes. Tears pricked my still aching eyes. You're right. He folded his arms and dropped the Texas drawl. We don't use deadly force, and when we do, there has to be a damn good reason. Remember what I told you? We wear the cape and do what we do to show normal people that we can protect them. They don't have to be afraid of us. What do you think the Brotherhood and the Sanguinary Boys showed them? That they should be very afraid. We went out there tonight to stop them, he went on relentlessly. Not to stop them from throwing down, to stop. 3 dead means 3 homicides. More injured means battery, aggravated assault, attempted homicides. They met to fight. That's premeditation and conspiracy to commit. All of them are culpable. They're all going away for a long time. A good long time, even. Courts will give maximum sentences without possibility of parole. They got no patience for superhumans who do what they do, so scores 3 dead bad guys and the rest in prison for at least a decade or 2. Maybe 3. Hopefully they'll kill each other there. Our hands are clean. Good citizens of Chicago sleep a little easier. I took a breath and let it out and slid off the table. He stayed where he was, and I headed for the door the long way around him. I stopped with my hand on the latch. "You're wrong about one thing," I said without turning around. "What's that?" "Our hands aren't clean." It's interesting because, like, he's clearly described as dropping the drawl, so clearly some of it is an affect, but he's from Texas. He's an oil man. Like, he was an oil man before becoming Atlas. So, like, he still has an accent. It's just he plays it up broader for the character. Which, who would really? I mean, if you are well known as being from that area and you're, playing into media stereotypes, you might as well put it on real broad and talk real slow. Really play into the whole sheriff stereotype. And this is the type of thing that I really enjoy about this book, is it really takes a sharp look at what it would mean for a superhero to be a brand in the public eye, in the same way that, like, we've seen the rise of the personal brand on social media. This really takes a look at that through the lens of superheroes, and I think it's very well written in that regard. It's part of the reason why I was like, you know what? I read this a long time ago, and it feels like it has a lot to say about celebrity culture that we're now seeing come to fruition. It's part of why I reached out to the author. That and the rest of the series is really good, and I'm very tempted to pick up the Fate RPG that's based in this now, because I need a superhero-based game other than Masks. Like, don't get me wrong, I like Masks. I love Masks. It's powered by the apocalypse. Of course it's going to be good. I'm a big sucker for that entire game style. But, like, Masks is very, like, laser focused on, like, a Teen Titans style dynamic, or like a Young Justice, or I'm trying to think of a good Marvel equivalent here. I guess New Mutants a little bit, kind of X-Men generally a little bit, but X-Men don't run that young. So I'm just thinking about it, and I'm like, that game's very good at what it does, and it's like laser focused at what it does. But I want another game that will be able to work more broadly with superhero teams rather than just one specific style. And I think the more I am realizing, like, what some of the story beats in this book mean for the setting at large, the more I'm like, oh, this would be a really fun one to play. Like, of course, I'd have to, as I do with every game I play, if there's an official setting, I'm gonna be sanding it here and there, and removing serial numbers and changing this and changing that, and having my own little take on it. But the base setting, if the base setting for the game is just the base setting for these books, there's a super, super good world there. Anyway, I digress. I could carry on. Let's dive into chapter 15. Headhunter was found dead this morning in Southside Chicago. At this time, there are no suspects, and since he was not in costume, police are positing a hate crime. Also, with no further declarations from the tea-time anarchist, the chief of police has upgraded Chicago's security status to nominal. Last night saw a major battle between the Sentinels and Guardians and both of Chicago's rival supervillain gangs. We'll have the full story for you at 12. The Chicago Morning News. So, naturally, I was in trouble. The clock tower fight hit the news, pushing Headhunter and even the tea-time anarchist off the air by lunchtime. After all, he hadn't blown anything up today. Dad came out of a pitch meeting when Mom called, and both called me. The conversation started with orders to pack. Suddenly, the U.S. Marshals program looked really attractive. Dad sounded ready to rip Atlas's heart out. He started with, "What the hell's that grandstanding son of a bitch thinking?" And it went downhill from there. So I said no. Then I said when hell sells timeshares and ducks sing freaking opera. That stunned them, and Dad started young ladying me. He hadn't done that since my last Shelley adventure. I put the phone on speaker so I could wave my arms while screaming, and ended with, "And forget Sunday dinner!" and hung up on them. Thankfully, I had no patrol that day, so I didn't see Atlas. And when Chakra said that we had to celebrate my first fight with a girls' night out, I jumped at the chance to get out of the dome. Didn't even ask where it would happen, at least start at the fortress. Chicago's the metropolis of the superhero world. We've got more superheroes per capita than any other city. New York and LA have theirs, but ours? Cooler. New York's are mostly super cops. LA's up to its eyeballs in phony silver screen heroes. The Fortress? That's the club for capes and cape watchers. One of the Rush Street clubs between Oak Street and Chicago Avenue, it might be world famous, but from the outside it makes me think of a maximum security prison. 2 stories of gray stone walls with narrow windows, iron trim, and no name over the entrance. Just a 5-cornered shield with an F in the middle. No imagination, it's basically Superman's symbol with an F instead of an S. Taxis pull up at all hours, and at night, there's always a line. They come to see the superheroes. No taxis for us, of course. Only Quinn couldn't fly, and she was perfectly happy to ride on my shoulders again, so we all made a pretty cool entrance, touching down outside the club together. The line cheered and applauded, and Quinn dismounted with a backwards cartwheel while cameras flashed. "Chakra! Nimbus! You guys are so hot! Astra! I'm yours! I love you, Harlequin!" The gatekeeper held the rope open, and we waved to the line as we headed inside. The Fortress is basically the Hard Rock Cafe for Cape Watchers. It's a shrine to capes as much as a club, and its walls are hung with news pictures, publicity posters, old equipment, framed costumes. Display cases hold museum-quality wax figures of some of the most famous local heroes. Atlas, Caterwall, Bombshell. The place is a cafe and dance club. Some come to eat and drink, more come to dance, but everybody comes to be see or be seen. Mom took Shelley and me here for lunch a couple times, but in the daytime the club part's closed and the crowd's a little more mundane. Shelley and I tried to sneak in after dark once, the occasion of Dad's last young lady lecture. Now the stuff on the walls was nothing compared to what was on the dance floor. I stared. Imagine the themed costume party where the invitation reads catsuits, jumpsuits, unitards, corsets, microskirts, or full-body tights are required. Masks and capes welcome. No earth tones. Leather, spandex, and latex preferred. At least half the crowd got the invitation. I saw Jack Frost, a seriously muscular cryokinetic, in metallic blue multi-parketed cargo pants and a blue and white peck-hugging athletic shirt, talking to Hardlock, a man of living steel wearing a black leather jumpsuit. Looking at Frost, I thought of last night and shivered. And there were conservatively dressed ones, too. Red Robin, a yellow flyer dressed in red and yellow spandex and a yellow cape. Chatted up Blue Fire, who only wore her flaming blue aura and strategic white bits of tape over blue-dyed skin. A Foxlight, wearing fur-patterned catsuit with face paint and spiked hair that had to take her an hour to get right, schmoozed with the Cardinal, out tonight in a red jumpsuit tuxedo with a white clerical collar. I even spotted Wisteria, her Amazonian supermodel figure, displayed in a deeply purple petal. I even spotted Wisteria, her Amazonian supermodel figure, displayed in a deeply purple petal-patterned catsuit with a high neck that left her arms and shoulders bare. The token domino mask she wore did nothing to hide her sharp features or her irritation as she tried to ignore Flashback. His black and white checker-patterned full-body stocking covered everything, even his hands, feet, and, disconcertingly, his face. How did he see, eat, drink? And those were just the capes I recognized right away. There were lots more mixed in with flamboyantly costumed wannabes and cosplayers. Some of them dressed in self-consciously modish variations of the classic style, but lots of the costumes bordered on fetish wear if they didn't, like Blue Fire's, gleefully embrace it. Artfully airbrushed suggestions of masks covered faces all around me, and I certainly felt overdressed. Sorry, I'm gonna digress again. The Can you imagine the cosplay scene in this like setting? What a wild like universe to be to be a cosplayer in. Like you have just like oceans, hundreds, thousands of superheroes to work with, and they all have to have costumes that are actually physically wearable in comparison to like a comic book superhero where you have to occasionally make some, fancy costuming choices to make it make sense. Like they're all wearing physical clothing. So like it has to work, and like there's got to be a whole cottage industry of like cosplay that's being bought and sold, and like the intricacies of like copyright law in regards to the IP of costume design is a whole spiel, I'm sure. Like think about modern cosplay. It's not just people making their own costumes anymore. It's people buying these costumes off of Etsy, off of Amazon, off of a million other retailers, eBay even. Like there's got to be people who are like exact like aesthetic people who are like, okay, I'm gonna play Astra. I have to get this precisely right down to every last stitch, and it needs to be perfect before I go out. And like, there becomes a question of like, are you trying to play into what you see of the actual hero versus what comes up in like the television shows and like comics that are being made about the actual heroes? It's a whole thing. It's mind blowing to think about. Yeah, I could really carry on. It's wild. Like this setting just has so many like fascinating questions, and some of them are answered, and some of them you're like, what? Huh? How is this not answered? If this is answered, which speaking of, we're about to learn one that I think kind of floats in the back of your head. You're like, wait a minute. With all this, are there people? Anyway, how can you tell who the real capes are? I asked Quinn. Oh, you can't always, she yelled back over the music. But most real heroes' costumes are better designed, more conservative, less likely to fall off in a fight. I laughed. No, really. The ones in costume that look like flashy clubwear, probably not real capes. Though I could be wrong. A legitimate hero might keep a club version of their costume in their closet. Why all the Atlas girls? I asked. I counted 5 in latex versions of Atlas's costume just from where I stood. Chakra laughed. You're kidding, right? No! Wannabe sidekicks, Atlas groupies, hoping to get lucky. You're. I looked around, realizing they weren't even the only people dressed as variants of popular capes. I even saw men dressed as male versions of well-known superheroines, including a male Hysteria. All that body-sculpted maleness and purple tights made my eyes water. My stomach sank. You mean... She nodded. Like groupies chasing pop stars, the tribute costumes practically scream, do me. Do they? I mean, I know, and yes. Even the Atlas girls, especially. She stopped, studying me seriously. Atlas is in here at least once a week. Usually slips a penthouse key to one of them. Looking at them again, I caught more than one fixing me with a hostile glare and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Or run. I like to think myself a sophisticated debutante at 16, raised in polite society and all that, but because of that, I'd been absolutely stupid. I didn't have his A on my chest, but every club goer here probably thought I had a permanent pass to his bedroom, and I'd had no idea. I wanted to go home, and that wasn't gonna happen. Chakra read my expression and smiled sympathetically. Chin up, she said under the music. You're royalty, this is your court. Who cares what they think? She meant it, and now I wanted to run for a different reason. This was as much debut as the press conference and my first fight. Me without my pearls. I raised my chin and she nodded approvingly. We headed for one of the high tables in the corner where the sound was lower. Perching on a high club chair, I realized the table had been engraved with the team's S in gold. Royalty. God. We ordered drinks, a virgin strawberry and melon iced cooler for me, and tapas and chorizo to snack on. The staff didn't dress up as superheroes, would have made them invisible. Instead, they all wore black pants and t-shirts. Nimbus couldn't drink, of course, but she seemed prepared to socialize and people watch all night. I think the music did something for her. You want to know, don't you? Chakra leaned over once we'd ordered. Know what? How Atlas has safe sex when he can powder stone? I must have flushed beet red because Quinn scolded her. Fishing desperately for a distraction, I suddenly realized we had something truly special to watch. Michael was in town for a concert and had arrived before we did. He and his entourage sat at another table where I hadn't spotted him through the crowd, but as the waitress walked away from the club, the DJ segued into Starlight, his newest hit. Every head turned his way when the low lead-in melody began. He looked up from his conversation, saw us watching, and gave us a smile. Then he glowed. As immaterial as Nimbus, he simply strolled through the table and the crowd as if they were phantoms, taking the rapidly clearing dance floor, and he danced. In a suit like Starry Night, he stepped and spun and moved like a robot's dream of humanity, trailing streams of light and throwing stars from his gloved hands. He played his fedora like Buster Keaton, whirling through his own light show, as solid as a dream and as heartbreaking. Michael's breakthrough had come on the day of the event, as if his whole soul had been longing for it. When I grew up, I sometimes wondered if the transformation, which had forever traded his mortal flesh for photons, was worth it for him. Watching him, I knew it was. Some blessings are pure, and as the song ended and the crowd erupted, he threw back his head and laughed like a young god. The crowd gradually went back to its ignore the great ones among us motion, but Nimbus couldn't stop staring and left without a word to go to his table. Michael's entourage bristled, but he nodded, and she joined them. Chakra and Quinn turned away, Chakra with a grin on her face. "Get 2 flashlights, mate," she quipped, drawing a scold from Quinn, and since she'd caught me with my glass to my lips, a splutter from me. Also, I want to be clear, this is the Michael you think it is. I'm not gonna say who it is, but it is who you think it is. It is as obvious as you think. "Girls," Quinn declared, "we've been completely upstaged." Since I knew I'd be dreaming of Starlight that night, I didn't care, but something else caught my attention. "When did Rush arrive, and who's he with?" Rush stood over by the bar and not with Stacy. The woman with him wouldn't have looked out of place painted on the side of a World War II bomber. She wore a retro pink romper with a wide white belt and domino mask, and a vaguely 40s hairstyle that made her look like she'd stepped out of a Vargas print. They were closer than the noise level required for conversation. Quinn looked. "Oh, shit. Shit. What? That's Euphoria. And?" She turned back to me. "Not all costume superhumans are superheroes or supervillains, for that matter. Some are just super skanks." Chakra sipped her drink with studied unconcern. "Euphoria's an escort? She has the power to light up your pleasure center. She can give you a little thrill or knock you on your ass with brain-shortening ecstasy. If she's not touching you, it takes it a bit to dial up, but she can flatten anybody who's got a working nervous system." I looked back at the bar. "She's not on a CAI team? Seems like a great man-stopper." "Yeah, it is, but she's got expensive tastes. CAI work doesn't pay her enough. So she's a member of the Lincoln Park Guardians, but she rents herself out. Evening of fine food and wine and a big tip, and she's anybody's. But she doesn't touch them. She just buzzes them. They always want more." Oh. The night had become far too educational. "Yep. Since nothing physical happens, it's all legal." I worried about Stacy, but Chakra just shrugged. Who cares if he's looking for something different? He bores easily. Quinn glared at her. It's not like when he tries to hijack... It's not like when he tries to hijack your panties between wives. Stacy's from good family. She's connected all the right people, and everyone knows what Euphoria does. If the newsies catch a whiff of this, it won't matter to the tabloids that she's no touchy. They'll come after Rush, and it'll splash all over us. Chakra picked up her drink. Let's go then. If we make a group of it, then it won't look so bad. You can beat up on Rush back at the Dome. I'll talk with Stacy later. Hold down the fort, Astro. With that, they decamped, leaving me to wonder what Chakra intended to talk to Stacy about. Probably include explicit instructions, gestures. Time to think of something else. Something not my parents. Like my fight with Atlas. I sipped my virgin cooler and nibbled on a spicy taco. Still couldn't get past it. He couldn't be right. But if we'd shut it down before it really started, we'd only have busted up a fight. And if two gangs really wanted to hack at each other, didn't not stopping them make us responsible? Obviously, Atlas would have preferred to let them keep fighting and arrest the survivors while the blood dried. Could he have been right? I squirmed, nursing my drink. My reaction to last night had been the response of a newbie who had never seen the mean streets. And honesty made me admit, fright certainly colored my reaction. My heart still raced when I remembered how helpless I'd felt as Brick pulled me down, but I knew the risks. Well, rats. I was going to twist on this. If I asked his opinion, Father Nolan would side with me. Probably. But I had a horrible feeling that Dad would side with Atlas. Bottom line, we hadn't killed anybody. We arrested the ones that had, and now innocent people slept safer. Did we owe the bad guys anything beyond the law's requirements? And did I owe Atlas an apology? I looked around for the girls. Maybe I ought to call it a night and sleep on it. Just remembering our argument made me feel sick. If he was right, or even half right, I'd have to apologize. Wish I could just drop it, but Mom had taught me better than that. Then I noticed the club-goer sitting next to me. The table to my left was empty when we sat down, but sometime since it had been occupied. The noise in my head and the occupant's unnatural silence kept me from noticing, but now her presence practically jumped out at me. She wore a night black costume, a spandex catsuit with gloves and thigh boots to match under a tailored bulletproof vest. Slid up to her waist at the sides, the vest hung down to her thighs in the front, and back almost like a skirt. Buckled straps hugged it to her figure and supported two empty shoulder holsters, and a deep hood cast her face in shadow. She was far more conservatively dressed than the rest of the room, and she was dead. Seriously dead. I was still learning to deal with the hugely increased slice of the spectrum I could see. Everything with a temperature above absolute zero radiates on some part of the infrared spectrum, so to me, everyone and everything's got a visible temperature. My brain translates as tinted overlays of the colors I know, dark purple being the coolest and brilliant white being the hottest. I was learning to mostly ignore it, like mall music. So in a dimly lit room full of people I sat surrounded by softly glowing human light bulbs, and she wasn't one of them. She was room temperature. And as I focused, I realized she wasn't breathing. I couldn't hear the soft percussion of a heartbeat either. A corpse sat next to me, drinking a margarita. Even for the Fortress on a Friday night, that was weird. I know exactly who this is. There's a whole side book that focuses on this character and their arc and, like, their whole thing, and they're fantastic. Because there's a mainline series of this series of these books. There's like 6 of them, which I've only read 3 of them, by the way. I did not know there were another 3. And then there's a side book focusing on this character, which I've read. They're all 3 all 3 of the ones I've read are fantastic. Anyway, chapter 16. Consider the psychology of the superhuman. Breakthroughs are generally triggered by severe physical stress or emotional shocks, but they're also sometimes the result of monomaniacal focus or psychotic drive. To say the least, a great many superhumans start with issues. Is suddenly being granted a large dose of wish fulfillment supposed to make them better adjusted? Dr. Alice Mendel, Superhuman Psychology. What do you say to a dead person? Pardon me, but why are you not breathing? Or do you ignore it as you do with someone who has really bad breath? My extensive social training hadn't prepared me for this, but at the very least, introductions were in order. When you've got two people sitting alone, side by side, then politeness demands it. Otherwise, you're obviously ignoring each other. Very rude. That decided me, and I turned to face her. Hello, I'm Astra. She picked up her drink and turned toward me. The sidekick. I know. Under the hood, she wore a black half mask that started at the cheekbones and turned into a skull cap, contoured to suggest a skull. On her pale face, even her thin lips were pale. The effect was spooky. So did you graduate last night? I'm sorry? Oh, you mean the Southside fight? She nodded, sipping her drink, and I shook my head. I'm still a rookie. Right now all they trust me with on my own is getting cats out of trees. My honesty surprised a laugh out of her. Serious? I can't even fly patrol without a partner yet. She smiled. A dry smile, but a genuine one. Artemis, it's nice to meet you. Do you mind if I ask a personal question? I might. Go ahead. I lowered my voice and leaned in a bit. Why are you room temperature? That sat her back. She set her margarita down. Finally, she said, any other observations to make? I plunged ahead. You're also not breathing except to talk, and you've got no heartbeat? She didn't say anything. I'm sorry. It's an observation, not a criticism. Sorry. She started to get up. Or I started to get up, but she put a hand on my arm, so I sat. She looked around, then leaned in closer. There's a stairs to the roof for flyers who don't want to walk in past the line. I'll meet you out there. And she was gone. Not going. Gone. In the space of a heartbeat, she faded into mist that swirled away, leaving me with a cold, damp wisp of breeze. A few patrons looked my way, and then away again as I stared at her empty chair. What had I started? My breath puffed in the damp night air when I stepped outside. I walked to the edge to look down at Rush Street, wanting to see something besides shadows in the sides of buildings. Clouds sailed above, bright with reflected city light, and I smelled someone's cigarette below. Marble lights. Wild that she can identify it's a Marlboro, just like by smell. Wild. Anyway. Then she stood beside me, going from mist to solid in the time that it took me to turn my head. I'd been holding myself ready for it and didn't quite jump. Much taller than me, she leaned on the wall to compensate, and we stood, wrapped in silence, while she looked down at the club line. I waited. It was her turn to talk. You know that some people break through because of an obsession? She said conversationally. Like your friend Chakra, who got there with sacred sex? I nodded. A few years ago, there was a sociopath named Tommy who wanted to be a vampire. Her breath didn't fog the air. He lived a lifestyle, drank blood, had dental work done, whole bit, but decided it wasn't enough. There's an old legend about suicides rising as vampires. He went with that. Should have simply killed him, and if God had any mercy, it would have. But it didn't? Oh no. He got to be one of the lucky ones. Freak's breakthrough gave him exactly what he wanted. Immortality and a real thirst for the blood he already fetishized. He got the full list of phobias, too. Holy water, crosses, consecrated ground, entering uninvited, garlic. But he didn't care. Because at heart, he was a rapist who'd never had the courage to even ask a girl out. She turned her back to the street and leaned against the ledge, watching me. I knew him in high school. Or he knew me, anyway. Can you picture me a cheerleader? He was just one of the invisible geeks we shared the halls with. Might have said something to me at graduation. I really don't remember. After he changed, he tricked his way into our home and ripped my parents' throats out, kidnapped me, kept me in a cellar for 2 weeks before turning me. I died in a dark hole. Then I woke up and killed him. Now she grinned, broadly, showing fangs. Staked him with a broken axe handle first chance I got. Then I cut his head off, burned the rest of his putrid corpse, scattered the ashes on Lake Michigan. She turned back and looked down at the club line again, her voice dropping. He even killed the dog. What kind of sicko does that? I flinched away from the image her bare words conjured up, pretty sure I was about to re-experience the tapas. I don't remember hearing any of this. You think the police like to advertise unsolved murders and disappearances? So far as they know, I'm still missing and presumed dead, and I keep it that way because, like you said, I don't breathe. Anne Rice has got a lot to answer for. Don't get me started on Joss Whedon. That was an addendum. That's on me. Perfectly good ad-lib though. That's horrible. How do you live? Being a freelance hero pays decently. No medical, though. She looked over me and sighed. I can make you forget the last 15 minutes or so, she offered. I'll go home, we'll call it a night. You know, look into my eyes. Look into my eyes. She gave it a corny Dracula lisp and waited for my answer. She was the second person to tell me she could steal my memories. Then, why did you tell me? Giving the happy crowd below a last look, she turned her back on the street. No reason. We were both made by evil men. She watched me, still as a plaster saint, while I thought about it. Finally gave an Atlas-style shrug, forcing a smile. We left our drinks downstairs. I called Mom and Dad when I got back to the dome. We got on time. Oh, we got time. We got time. We got time. We got loads of time. Of course. How long has the internet been out? Oh, not that long. Excuse you, I have internet. Come on. Well, at least it died in the middle of a chapter divide. We got that. Hang on a minute. Let me see once if I can just restart the internet, get that to fix it. It says no internet. Oh, there it goes. Alright, we're good. Cool. For those of you who dropped out on the live feed for a moment there, Artemis. We have met Artemis now. She is a vampire who got turned by a guy who was a real scumbag and wanted to be a vampire so hard that when he died, he did not die. It also name drops Anne Rice, which like was a much more like topical reference at the time. You know, you don't think about Anne Rice quite so much these days, other than suing people for writing fan fiction. It's really the only context I think of them in anymore. But anyway, we've got time for, I believe, one more chapter here. So let's dive into. Oh, we're getting to part 3 of the book now. Chapter 17. Burnout's jury trial commences today. Burnout, aka Roger Carr, is facing multiple counts of statutory rape, drug possession, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and if sentenced, could receive from 10 to 20 years in a prison. Many critics of the prosecution are calling the trial a political stunt on the part of D.A. Alan Montanolia. Chicago News at 5. I fumbled my apology Monday morning, something not at all like me. Started badly when I knocked on the open door of Atlas's surprisingly bare office. I'm sorry. He looked up from his e-pad. Oh, what? Now I hesitated. Should I repeat myself or wait for his permission to come in? Covering my social stumble with a tug to straighten the line of my vest, I stepped inside. Do you have a moment? Absolutely, he said, dropping the pad beside his mask and pointing to a chair. Sit down, please. He seemed glad to see me, and I took it as a good sign. Closing the door carefully, I sat, and promptly froze up again. He gave me a moment, and when I obviously didn't know where to start, started for me. You want to talk about Thursday night? Getting a grip, I took a deep breath. Yes, I reacted badly. I wanted to apologize. I shouldn't have questioned your judgment. I'm sorry. I realized that I was on the edge of my seat, practically sitting on my hands. I folded them in my lap. Where had all my social training gone? Mom would be embarrassed for me. I was wrong. Wait, what? I took unnecessary risks. You were right about that. When we went in, we should have gone in hard and left no more room for shenanigans. Still wouldn't have stopped it from starting, but they'd already been caught misbehaving, and we didn't have to let 'em add to it. When you put on the cape, you do the job, but I made it more dangerous than it should have been. People who shouldn't have been got hurt. Sorry. I'm fine, really. I protested automatically. No, you're not. I was wrong there, too. You're a hard one, I can tell. Not on other people, mind you, on yourself. You weren't ready Thursday, not in your head. Expected you to walk in this morning, tell me you were done, that you'd reconsidered, but you haven't, have you? I opened my mouth and closed it again. No, I hadn't, but why not? So I'll accept your apology if you accept mine. He smiled, and something indecipherable crept into his eyes. Can I say I was impressed? Don't care how rough field hockey gets. You never been in a real fight before. You handled brick and cryo all by yourself. Thank you. I found myself blushing like a schoolgirl. He smiled again, shaking his head. No need. Calling it like I see it. I bit back a second lame thank you, had no idea what to say, and was pathetically grateful when he looked at his clock. Isn't Ajax waiting for you? Oh, yes, thank you. I stammered something at least halfway coherent before getting out of there, blushing hotter than I'd ever blushed before. What's going on? Quinn only added to the weirdness of the day. She cleared my morning schedule, and I found her waiting for me when I left my training session. Her eyes twinkled behind her black domino mask. Have you got a few minutes before you go study? A few, I said. What's up? Come on up to my office, she grinned, all mysterious. I'll show you. She had an upstairs office, so we took the elevator up to the atrium. I said hi to Tom in passing. I kept trying to get to know the security and support people, but Tom, Bob, and even Willis spoke only when spoken to, and then stayed strictly on point. Willis, the most talkative of the crew, was laconic in the extreme. It was weird. The ground floor, with its theater, museum, and gift shop, is mostly open to the public during the day, and we made our way through a crowd of morning visitors that included at least one third or fourth grade field trip troop, a large, happy swarm, all wearing Junior Sentinel t-shirts, bouncing and waving as the guides tried to get them organized for a trip through the museum. We laughed and waved back without stopping. I had learned if we did stop, all traffic through the atrium practically froze around us. Too bad, really, even if they were a little too old for Got Your Nose or What's Your Name. Quinn's office flanked Al's just off the city room. A high-tech version of any police precinct dispatch room with lots of smart screens and open stations. It's home to Dispatch, the team that moves us and the other CAI teams around like chess pieces. Other workstations share the room with the 10 dispatch stations, filling the space with chatter and energy. We came in through a railed-off and glass-walled observation deck there so visitors and tours could move through easily without disturbing the dispatchers. A short set of stairs took us to a higher balcony along the left wall. Alex and Quinn's offices were glass-walled on the city room side so that both of them could watch the action without stepping out on the balcony. Closing Quinn's door shut out the noise, and from her desk we couldn't be seen from the city room floor. Posters of Vegas shows covered the other 3 walls. She followed my glance, but didn't comment on them. Sit, she said, pointing to the chair beside her desk. Sitting behind it, she turned her huge computer flat screen so we could both see it and handed me the mouse. Thought you might want to see this. The screen displayed Powerbeat's website open to a page dedicated to young and hip heroes. Today, the page was all about me. No way. An article about last Thursday's fight sat front and center, and it breathlessly credited me with taking down 2 A-class villains in my first battle. I followed the links. Lots of them took me to pictures and video of me and Atlas flying patrol. One linked to a whole page of cell phone pictures of me and the other girls outside the fortress, and Others led to blogs and posts analyzing, dissecting me, my power set, costume, sidekick status, speculating about my background. A flame war raged between one camp hailing me as the new post-feminist icon and another camp denouncing me as some kind of sellout. Fittingly, when we're talking about sellouts, I just remembered I have not promoted any of my stuff all night. And, you kind of got to do that so that people know what you're doing. It's the whole point of, promotion. So I'm going to take a minute or two here and I'm going to remind you all that, first of all, the thing we're doing tonight is actually recorded into a podcast. It's true. Check out papercutsbooks.libsyn.com or your favorite podcatcher. We are the blue podcast named Papercuts. There's at least 3 podcasts named Papercuts, and we all interact with books in some way, but I'm the one that reads aloud. The other 2 do criticism of variously zines and, fittingly for tonight's theme, comic books. But we're the one with the blue snowflakes background. So, keep an eye out for that in your favorite podcatcher. Or are you more of a video podcast watcher, huh? Well, I got something for you there, too. We actually have a YouTube channel. I'm using the we royally here. It is just me on the team around here. Well, I guess technically Raz is also a team member for the for the channel, as she's the art. She's the handler of art assets. Things I can't make with programming, she will draw for me very cordially. And of course, we've got the mod team around here live. But I digress. You want to check out the VODs of the Twitch stream? You missed 1 week. You want to be able to read the book as it comes up on screen, so you don't have to keep track in your own device. That's what YouTube's for. One more thing I'm going to promote is the Discord. I know websites these days, you subscribe to a channel on YouTube, you follow somebody on Twitch, sometimes the reminders just don't come through correctly. So the Discord is a really great place to be reminded of everything that's going on. I tend to post reminders every time I do something new. I'll post pictures of, projects I'm working on, bread recipes as I'm baking, sewing, a lot of things that take much longer to bleed out into the broader internet. You'll catch them first in the Discord. Yeah, I'll have more stuff to plug later, but for now, let's get back on topic, shall we? Chatter scores rate you the most talked about hero this morning, Quinn said as I scanned the links. You're way ahead of Burnout's drug and sex scandal. The tabloids are already crying child endangerment despite your costume enhancements, and bets are being taken on whether you'll become a full-time cape when you finish your training and if it'll be with the Sentinels. But why? First, because you're with the Sentinels. With 4 movies, a TV series, graphic novel line, the fact that our first real-world superhero and the President of the United States are founding members, I don't know, for some reason, we're still the team as far as the public's concerned. We're an unstoppable franchise, really. Second, you're the sidekick of America's premier hero, who happens to be the real-world answer to Superman. If he's not the biggest Boy Scout, he's at least the world's last cowboy. Third, and I missed this angle at first, you're the only current Sentinel with a true secret identity. What's that have to do with anything? She put her elbows on her desk and folded her hands under her chin, looking far too happy. Most superheroes don't have real secret identities. Think about it. Lots of breakthroughs happen publicly. Mine happen right on stage, for crying out loud. Capes whose breakthroughs aren't public still have the problem of living a double life. So lots of heroes don't bother. They wear the mask on duty so they won't be recognized getting coffee at Starbucks when they're off. And of course, reporters and photographers know better than try and bug us when we're going civilian. But what about a part-time hero, like, say, Iron Jack? She flipped her fingers. Now there, it's easier to remain a mystery man, and some full-time heroes take on civilian cover identities too. Sort of like the Federal Witness Protection Program. Change of hair color, style, new name, new social security number. Then, of course, there are superhumans like me who are permanently transformed. For us, secret identities of any kind really aren't an option. I went over the team roster in my mind. She was right. Of all the team's founders, only Minuteman had maintained a real secret identity. All the current Sentinels had only private identities, such as they were, since, with the exceptions of Blackstone and Ajax, none of them had careers outside the team. The university didn't mind if Ajax occasionally missed a lecture, and Blackstone really only performed his magic act 2 nights a week from the theater he owned. So why's that the media frenzy? It's the whole mystery woman thing. You're young, photogenic, very strong and tough, mentored by a big name, complete unknown. Makes you an irresistible puzzle to Cape Watchers everywhere. They can make what they want of you. Believe me, the fanfiction sites are already spinning stories about your childhood, origin, relationship to Atlas. FYI, don't read those unless you're using an adult content filter. And the better you do your job, the worse the attention's going to get. I tried not to feel panicked. This was so not incentive. What should I do? She pushed her chair back and spun it around with a foot. First thing to do is get you more media coverage, she said, laughing when I groaned. I've already set up an interview and photo session with Powerbeat. That's a good start. We also need to get you to more public events. The more you do publicly in costume, the less they'll be interested in your out-of-costume life. I know, it sounds strange, but that's how it works. We also need to get you into our entertainment lines, TV show, comics, quick as we can. Fictional secret identity for the viewers to identify with. Sure, they'll know it's fiction, but fans will identify with the character anyway, and even the actress. The more they see the character, the less interested they'll be in the real thing. She stopped spinning and looked serious. But you'll always have to be careful of identity stalkers. All it takes is one obsessed fan who just has to know, or someone who wants serious leverage to blow up your secret if you're careless. Someone finds out who you are and wants to out you, they don't even need to go to a major news agency to publish it. All they have to do these days, post it on the net, goes viral in minutes. My breath caught at the thought that a single mistake could destroy my safe anonymity. Quinn read my face and smiled reassuringly. Don't worry, just be careful. Keep the mask on everywhere, even downstairs. Don't talk to people you know or places you go is hope when you're Astra. The basic stuff. Like I said, the more public exposure you get, the less you have to worry about the private exposure. And there, I've got a brilliant idea for you. You know what? I think we got time for one more. Let's do one more. Grab a little water. Also, I don't know if I called it out during the stream a couple days ago, but Kariki at some point subscribed with his Prime subscription. I really appreciate that. You get one of those a month, and it is free technically. You get it because you've got Amazon Prime and you've linked it to your Twitch. So if you feel like using your free subscription around here, you will hear no complaints from me. You get such lovely things as, say, our subscriber emotes, like these ones of Magnuson Library. They're really cute, actually. Raz is the one who did those. What else do you get? You don't have to sit through ads, which is always nice. I feel like you get like one other thing that I'm forgetting. I mean, technically, you're giving me some money, which I always appreciate. I've been working on having like a little area in the Discord that you get for being a subscriber. That's still in the works. I've got something clever planned. Maybe even if you subscribe for a long enough time or donate some money, we might be able to organize, say, me running a tabletop RPG for you and a group of friends. Not a bad idea. I'll think about that. That's actually not a bad idea. Like if you're subscribed long enough, be like, I can send you like a DM or something and be like, hey, you've been subscribed for X amount of time. You want to run a tabletop game? you know? But I digress. I need to plan that off stream. Let's dive into chapter 18. In a 5-4 decision today, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of general arrest warrants, the hugely controversial warrants that may be issued on especially dangerous superhumans with the inclusion of a dead or alive provision. Commonly called death warrants, they're posted publicly and may be exercised by any citizen, and are opposed by the ACLU on the grounds they violate a suspect's right to a fair trial. The controlling language of the majority opinion, however, rests on the argument that the constitutional guarantee of a trial depends upon a successful arrest, something either impossible or suicidal to attempt in the case of many superhumans. Tom Atkins from the Wall Street Journal. I did not like Quinn's idea at all, both but both Al and Atlas did, so I did what I always do with evils I can't avoid. I forgot about it. September passed into October, and I tried not to think about missing the first weeks of college. I got all my courses transferred to online work without much trouble, even taking Ajax's introductory course, Superhuman Studies. How awesome to have him available to discuss his lectures personally. And I had plenty else to distract me. Dad wasn't speaking to Atlas, or Ajax, or anybody else in the dome, for that matter. We'd talked, but we weren't talking. He wanted his princess safe, and throwing me into supervillain battles, even with backup, hadn't been part of the plan. He used to drop by the dome a couple times a week to spar with Ajax, but that was over now, and only Mom came to lunch or dinner. I knew I shouldn't, but I really felt responsible for the rift. Both Atlas and Ajax continued my fight training, even ramping it up. Since Atlas had originally discouraged me from becoming any kind of cape, I wondered why. And Dr. Beth worked up an exercise and toughening regime that would make me even stronger over time. Apparently he'd decided what I was one more time. Sentence. Apparently he'd decided what I can read. English is my first language. I've been doing this for years. Apparently he decided I was what he'd called a progressive breakthrough. It wasn't fun. I was back to calling him Dr. Death in my head. In every session, Ajax showed me my limits, how hard a hit I could take and still hit back. I knew how to play rough, but sparring with Ajax felt like daily beatings at a fight club. One session started me with trying a repeat of my surprise move from the first day. Ajax simply stepped aside and hammered me into the floor with his maul as I came in, and it got worse from there. I could break off the fight, but the point was to subdue him like I had Brick. After 10 minutes of mounting frustration and repeated thumpings, twice he'd grappled and pinned me, he called an end to it.
You're improving.
Uh-huh. I dropped to the floor and lay back, gasping and rubbing my side. Why do you wear armor anyway? Not like you need it. He chuckled, sounding like an amused bear, and sat beside me.
Part of it is to give me more mass, since I can't brace myself against an impact the way you and Atlas can. Even so, remember how easily you pushed me to the wall the first time.
And the other part?
Visor protects me from blinding attacks, suit and helmet seals against gas, and helps against sonic attacks. Got a tactical HUD projector on the visor, shielded data links, and the armor gives me another layer of protection. Since it's stiffer than my skin, it absorbs blunt impacts better. Same philosophy as my maul. My strength in a fight is my ability to take damage and give it back, so anything that improves my ability to do one without compromising the other is a good thing.
Okay, why don't you just carry a really big gun?
Because superheroes don't. Old-fashioned weapons like swords, warhammers, maces, those are tradition. Guns are for soldiers, the police, bad guys.
That made sense.
So what do you do?
So what do you do against an opponent with a ranged attack?
Let somebody else handle it. In a pinch, I can throw them all pretty far. Thinking about cryo, aren't you?
Yes, I whispered, looking at the ceiling. Still dreamed about the fight. He shrugged.
In the comics, superheroes rely only on their powers, but look at me, or Rush. He wears a helmet. His racing suit is anti-ballistic weave. Can't dodge everything.
Now he put on a grand voice, thumping his chest.
We who fight as the heroes of old, body to body, blow for blow, we lay our hands on the weapons we need.
He finished in a wry tone and another deep chuckle.
You understand?
I think so.
Good. One last thing. When I pinned you, why didn't you just fly me into the wall or ceiling? Not going to weigh that much.
Oh.
I wrapped my arms around my head and just laughed. A week later, Ajax gave me a special belt buckle made of two separate discs. The front disc with the emblem on it connected to the back disc only by a sliding catch, and when I pushed sideways firmly, the two pieces snapped apart, and I found myself holding a well-balanced titanium disc, better and thicker, bigger and thicker than a silver dollar. He taught me how to throw it, and after that I practiced with my little holdout weapon every day at the indoor range. The dreams of helplessness and aching cold laughter gradually went away. My flight lessons with Atlas were interesting in an entirely different way. No, not happening, I said. Yes, it is. We were out at the CAI practice range on a wet Wednesday morning. I stared at the huge concrete block downfield of us. He had just proposed that I point myself at it like a diver, make a pair of fists, and fly through it. I half wondered if he wasn't trying to get me to reconsider my career path again. Get up here. He held his hand out at chest height, palm down. I raised myself up to hover beneath his palm, feeling like a kid learning to float in the correct position. Taking my waist, he turned me so I faced the ground. He ran his hands up my arms, pulling them to a straight point ahead of me, raised my chin so I peered at the target over my fists, and pushed down on my back to get the curve right. Point your toes. I started giggling uncontrollably. This is serious business, but I heard laughter in his voice and lost it completely. Do I look as silly as I feel? I gasped when I could finally talk again. Yeah, and now you're all catawampus. Point your toes. He corrected my posture, which had gone all over the place. It's all about form and penetration, he explained, pushing against my fists with his free hand. Your fists are the smallest striking surface you can get your momentum behind. The position helps protect your head and neck when you're fixing to hit something. We're tough, but ramming things with them is still not the best use of our heads. He pushed against the small of my back to make me deepen the curve. You got the basic instinct down. When you surprised Ajax in his demonstration, and when you took Brick and Cryo, you used your mobility aggressively. But now I gotta teach you how hard you can safely hit and how to hit, so stay in form. Fire yourself at the target. You can do it. He slapped my butt like I was a stubborn horse he was trying to move. I gave him a look and then turned back to stare at the target over my fists. Thankfully, the early morning hour meant we had the range to ourselves. I took a deep breath, aimed beyond the target, and launched myself. If I'd been a car, I'd left burning rubber for 100 feet, and the concrete block leapt at me. I acknowledged the G-forces, but focused on holding my form, tucking my head down at the last moment. Tumbling gracelessly, I plowed into the muddy ground beyond the block. Atlas landed beside me as I flipped mud out of my hair. I ached from my fist to my shoulders, and my head rang. Now what'd we learn? I looked up at him disgustedly, noticing that he kept his boots inches above the mud. Don't do that? Yep. In the movies, you see folks like us plow into bunkers, fly straight into the ground, generally use their bodies like they were missiles. Isn't that the point? Well, yes, but you don't reuse missiles. Oh, right. Now look at the block. He pointed to where it lay, mostly intact, but several yards from where it stood. If it had been wider and thinner, your hit had blown through, breaking it, minimizing the impact to you. Thickness is armor, mass is armor, inertia is armor. You hit something hard enough and you don't break or move it, it'll probably break you. Simple physics. You hit, you take a hit. If that block had been anchored, probably would have broke. If that block had been anchored, would have broken you. You do it. I've seen news clips. Yeah, and I only pick targets that are more fragile than I am, or aren't too heavy to knock aside like you did. Don't plan on going through a wall if you can go through a window or door. You're going to learn all about modern construction, how to recognize different types of materials, difference between a hollow concrete block wall you threw brick through and solid granite walls you don't want to try directly. Sometimes you got to hit something you're not sure of. You'll learn how hard you can safely hit in them cases. We're tough, but we're not really invulnerable. Let's try a different target.
He reached down to give me a hand up. I hesitated, then succumbed to temptation. Let's try this first. Grabbing his hand, I flipped him into the mud. Totally caught off guard, he splashed wonderfully. I laughed at the appalled look on his face, but he came back up with a fistful of mud pie. Took us a while to get to the other targets, and we had to hose down first. The fun and messy training session banished most of the awkwardness I'd been feeling since the apology. Though I still felt weird being mentored by a hero I used to squee over and now wasn't at all sure of, I was able to focus more on my studies. In addition to coursework and the procedure manuals Ajax gave me, I also studied everything Blackstone had on the Tea Time Anarchist. Now that I knew what to look for, I could easily separate the styles of TA and his copycatting nemesis, who I had started calling Dark Anarchist, or DA. What I couldn't wrap my head around was TA's claim that somehow I stood in the way of his nemesis' plans. I kept looking, hoping to see what direction DA was pushing, to see how I was supposed to get into his way, but there wasn't enough information. For one of a nail, a horseshoe was lost. For one of that horseshoe, the horse was lost. For one of the rider was lost. For one of a horse, the rider was lost. For one of the rider, the battle was lost. For one of the battle, the kingdom was lost, and all for the one of a horseshoe nail. What if you knew you were the nail, or at least one of them? Well, all of this kept me pretty busy until the day I'd been dreading arrived. The opening day of MetroCon and Quinn's PR plan for me. That's right. We're going to a convention. You thought they were going to talk about cosplay and celebrity culture and they're not going to bring up a convention? No. Real thing. Superhero convention is as common as you think it is. And that's Eat Your Heart Out, Marvel. This book did it first. I say as if I know whether the... Well, Miss Marvel was publishing roughly around the same time as this, right? The run that the TV show was based on, I mean. Let's look that up, actually, before we take a little break. When was that? Comic run. Oh, yeah, that was in 2015, so really, Eat Your Heart Out, Marvel. They got here first. Anyway, I think we're gonna call a little BRB. We will be, in fact, right back. Now is a fantastic time to have a little break yourself. If you've been sitting along with us, get up and stretch. You know, get some movement going. If you've been standing and wandering around, now might be a great time to take a little rest. Definitely get hydrated, especially if you haven't been drinking along with me. Water is very important. If you've got any necessary medications you usually take around this time, here is your reminder. Definitely pet your pets for me. Come join the Discord to show me that you're petting your pets. And, just take care of things generally. We will be back in about 15 minutes. In the meanwhile, let's pick up where we left off with the episode of Space Patrol that we were listening to, and we'll probably play one or two more. So I'll see you all in a little bit.
Right. I'm afraid we fell into a trap. They wanted us to blast off in this ship. Have me check the air system to see what they rigged up. I'll notify Venus River Patrol to take soundings up and down the river for that sub.
Where are we now? Right where we want to be. Pier 7.
Let's dive right back in, trying to find out what sort of press junket that Quinn has had planned for Astra here at a fan convention, believe it or not, and we'll dive into chapter 19 to find out. Kinetics make up one of the largest superhuman categories, with many subcategories. Each kinetic type controls, shapes, or even creates a single substance or force. There are, for example, the elemental kinetics, aerokinetics, hydrokinetics, pyrokinetics, terrakinetics, who can manipulate air, water, fire, and earth. Electrokinetics are more common, cryokinetics less so. Telekinetics can move anything with their mind they could otherwise manipulate manually. Barlow's Guide to Superhumans. If you ever meet a fat man in a Japanese magical princess costume, just keep walking. Trust me on this one. Astra, Notes from a Life. Oh, we got 2 book quotes this time. Interesting, it's usually just one. I forgot about that. Anyway. I'd ignored MetroCon for 3 years, and it had only grown bigger. MetroCon started life as the National CAI Conference, the biggest annual CAI training and expo event in the country. Teams and selected members of teams come from around the world, and with all those capes around, the superfans started to show up as well. Although the NCAIC occasionally debates taking itself elsewhere, it never will. The income from the convention more than pays for the conference. It's always held at the Chicago Sports Center, originally built to attract the Olympic Games, and it's a huge deal. 3 days of seminars, training, and a closed expo, then 3 days of competition and MetroCon. And of course, the Sentinels host the party. This year, Atlas and Blackstone were supposed to do the honors, but Al and Quinn decided on a change of plans. Looking down at the colorful crowd that thronged Main Street, I wondered how I would thank them. Filling the dome with jelly beans sounded attractive. TA could help. Main Street seemed smaller than I'd remembered. Looking like a movie set for a 20th century urban street, it connected the conference center to the sports center. Atlas and I arrived through the arcade skyway, greeted by huge cheers from the colorful crowd. He waved as we dropped to the balcony at the conference hall end, and I tried to imitate his casual poise. The balcony doors led us to the convention's VIP lounge, and a big guy who pulled Atlas into a back-thumping man-hug. Hank! Atlas stood back, keeping a grip on the man's huge biceps that weren't built into his suit, as I tried not to stare. Quinn told me the Hollywood Knights were one of the training teams this year. Turning actors into real heroes now? Well, they're a work in progress, the big man grumbled with a smile. He ran a hand over his polished dome and winked at me as I stood there, blushing and speechless. Aren't you going to introduce us, John? Astra, Rook, Astra. The rat chuckled as I tugged my cape straight. He hadn't given me a word of warning, but everybody knew Rook. He headed to Hollywood after spending a few years with the Sentinels and got recruited to lead the Knights. A nearly 7-foot-tall black man, muscled like Conan the Barbarian, and wearing a dark blue and black textured spandex bodysuit, he was probably the second most recognizable Atlas-type hero in the country. His domino mask, like Atlas's, didn't really hide anything, since everybody knew who Hank Sawyers was. He'd come from Chicago's South Side, and if most Hollywood heroes were actors with superpowers, Rook was a superhero who happened to act. He shook my hand. It's great to meet you, Astra, and I'm glad the team has more muscle on it again. They treating you right? I smiled self-consciously. It worries me that people keep asking me that. That earned a laugh, and he winked at me again. Someone as pretty as you will have to do a Knights Sentinels team-up. I'll get the scriptwriters working on it, give you an excuse to get away from this town. Get you down there in the sun, you won't come back. He glanced aside to catch Atlas's frown, eliciting another laugh. Seriously, though, you ever have dreams of going Hollywood? Knights will get you started. Can't be a sidekick forever. I nodded, not at all sure if he was serious or just ribbing his former teammate. Whichever, Atlas wasn't playing. With a glare for Rook, he put his hand on the small of my back and turned me to face the room, saying, Now let me introduce you to everybody. There were a lot more than 3 of us in the room, and he took me through a whirlwind of introductions. Most of the Knights were hanging out there, including Balder, so handsome I stared again, Starkness, a very scary woman, Ceres at 7, looking completely out of place in GQ fashion blazer and khakis. Atlas seemed to know everybody, even though a lot of them were from CAIs as far away as El Paso, Texas. Couldn't really say I liked the El Paso guys. They called themselves the Guard. All of them wore gray and black trim jumpsuit uniforms with army boots and leather gloves. Their shiny black masks were skull-hugging helmets that hid their faces almost completely. They looked hard, on edge, even in the relaxed lounge. I got the feeling they didn't really think much of the rest of us. Introductions made, Atlas asked 7 if he could go squire me around. I didn't say I could go anywhere without being mobbed, but Seven cheerfully agreed, and we stepped out as Atlas, Rook, and the other CAI team leaders huddled to conference. "What do you think of them boys from the border?" he asked once the door closed behind us. "The guard?" I shivered theatrically, and he grinned. "They're spooky, but they're keeping a lid on the most dangerous border in the world. Murder rate in Juarez across the river is 6 times the Mexican national average. Kidnapping's practically an industry, and there's narcotics-driven civil war going on. Half Mexican drug lords and their lieutenants seem to be supervillains these days, and not the fun kind." "Wow." I looked back at the door. "That's why they all got secret identities, and rumor is not one of them's from El Paso. No family to threaten, even if you knew who they were." He shrugged it off with a smile. "So what you want to see?" "Not sure what I can see," I said, returning the smile to show that I didn't mind. "I've been to Metrocon before as a fan. I know how crazy fans can get around the big names." "Like adoring lemons," he agreed, happily enough. "You're all new and shiny. That's why Atlas asked me to escort you." "Wait a minute, this is Rook. Has this been Rook the whole time?" "No, it's Seven. I don't think we've met Seven before, actually." Do I want Seven to have that same accent? What's Seven's deal, right? Have we... I don't know Seven's whole deal. It's kind of gently implied that he's sort of a fashion guy. You know, I mean, looking completely out of place in the GQ fashion blazer and khakis. You know what? Actually, there's probably a public wiki for this book. My brain is a little smooth. Oh yeah, it's Lucky Seven. Oh yeah, I remember this guy. This is the guy who has, like, his power is perfect luck, so of course he can wander her around it. You know what? Yeah, let's rewind here. Let's redo this bit. Uh, so, what do you think of the boys from the border? "The guard?" I shivered theatrically, and he grinned. "They're spooky, but they're keeping a lid on the most dangerous border in the world. The murder rate in Juarez, just across the river, is 6 times the Mexican national average. Kidnapping's practically an industry, and there's a narcotics-driven civil war going on. Half the Mexican drug lords and their lieutenants seem to be supervillains these days, and not the fun and flamboyant kind." "Wow." I looked back at the door. "That's why they all have secret identities, and rumor is that not one of them is from El Paso. No family to threaten, even if you knew who they were." He shrugged it off with a smile. "So, what would you like to see?" I'm not sure what I can see," I said, returning the smile to show I didn't mind. "I've been to Metrocon before as a fan. I know how crazy fans get around the big names." "Like adoring lemmings," he agreed happily enough. "You're all new and shiny. That's why Atlas asked me to escort you." He looked like a well-dressed ex-boy band singer, a young and guileless Brad Pitt with artfully mussed blonde locks framing bright, happy eyes. Tweens and teens probably still swooned over him in herds, and somehow he could keep the fans away? His grin widened as if he read my thoughts, and I blushed. "Sorry, I just don't get it. That's okay, don't follow the business much." I shook my head. "Till this happened to me, I pretty much ignored it." "I figured." He turned around to walk backwards down the hall in front of me. "I am Seven, luckiest son of a bitch alive. It's my power, total godlike serendipity. Got it?" Not really. I walk through firefights, the guns jam, misfire, come apart, get dropped, or just plain miss. Bombs don't go off when I'm in the blast zone, or if they do, I'm in a blast shadow. World's greatest martial artist could trip and break his neck if he tried to hit me. If I need a ride, a taxi, or a obliging fan just happens to be there, I always have correct change in my pocket. An even wider grin. And I always get the cool jobs. His smugness was cloying. "So you're lucky? How does that help with crowd control?" "Simple." He pointed a finger at me, like his hand was a pistol, and made a popping noise. "I want to enjoy your company without hassle, and so I shall. Don't know how it'll work out, but from experience, I'd guess that everyone who sees us will either be distracted by something else or assume that you're just a really good cosplayer. Really? Doesn't that mean you could just, like, win every lottery in the world? Why don't you live on your own island by now? He frowned. You know, you're one of the few people to see the problem that fast. We came to the stairs, and he led me down them, still walking backwards. Truth? I don't know. It's like my luck is a guardian angel. It keeps me safe, indulges my whims, but doesn't let me really go to town with it. Can be really annoying. But it does let you show off, I said, tartly. Watching him go backwards downstairs made me twitch with wanting to grab him before he tripped up. Then a comical look flooded his face as his foot missed a step and he windmilled his arms desperately. I reached out and grabbed him by his blazer collar before he could tumble and found us nearly bumping noses. See? He laughed softly. Here I was, thinking it'd be nice to get closer to you. I almost pushed him down the stairs. We came out in the expo hall, which opened to the public on day 4. The noise was amazing. Most of the booths showcasing serious hardware and companies like Blacklock Security had departed, replaced by booths selling to the sea of convention goers. Thousands packed the hall, surging down the wide aisles between the rows of booths, while flyers swanned about in the air above them, a lot of them carrying banners. Some of the rows were themed. The central aisle, more of a boulevard, was lined by the big TV and movie production studios, advertising their superhero drama, action, and reality series. Lesser-known, grade B superhero actors sat at signing tables or chatted with fans about their shows. The big and small comic publishers had their own row. Another row was dedicated to CAI teams from all over, there to push their own merch, talk about their activities, and even recruit. We had our own booth, even, manned by staff, of course. Cosplayers mingled with authentic capes everywhere, and some of them were amazing impersonators. Others made me shudder. Seven caught the direction of my horrified gaze and winced at the 30-year-old guy with a serious beer gut stuffed into the most famous girl's costume in Japanese superhero anime. The better cosplayers attracted small crowds and posed for pictures, but though a few appreciative glances came my way, nobody stopped us. Seven was right, and I laughed when I saw why. One of the cosplay clusters revolved around a very pretty woman, obviously a model, wearing my costume better than I did. She posed solo and with convention guests as the crowd snapped pictures, and a table behind her displayed framed glossies of her in other costumes. They were obviously for sale. Professional cosplayer? Who knew? I stopped at the Las Vegas Nights booth and bought a pricey Vegas Nights coffee mug just to annoy Seven. I made a mental note to buy a Hollywood Nights mug later for my desk at the Dome to annoy Atlas. I finally got stares when I gave them the Dome's address for shipping, but they were way too professional to make a scene, and we got away clean, Seven laughing with me. Then I spotted someone who was not a cosplayer, but who simply couldn't be here. Seven, I grabbed his jacket arm. Is your serendipity contagious? Sometimes, if what's good for someone else is good for me too. Why? Because the odds of this are really steep, I said, diving into the crowd and pulling him along with me. She didn't see us coming. More luck again. Artemis! I spoke right in her ear, or where it should be under her black hood, and found myself staring at 2 guns. Whoa, those had better be props, Seven said. She holstered them with a twirl. Amazingly, nobody freaked, but we were attracting attention. Grabbing my arm, she turned us and smiled at the camera flashes before she started walking. I skipped to keep up, Seven right behind me. Shouldn't you be sleeping? I don't know, at least underground? An imp took control of my mouth. Ooh, can I have your autograph? Get serious, she snapped back, and I rolled my eyes. This was Metrocon. Nothing was serious. With all the memories waiting to ambush me, I so hadn't wanted to be here, but I realized I had actually started to enjoy myself. She pulled the tarp aside and then stepped into an empty booth being used as storage space and turned on me. How do you know it was me? 1, I said, keeping the volume down. Who dresses up as a little-known urban myth for Metrocon? And 2, hello? Room temperature? Seven looked confused, so I made the introductions. Artemis, 7 of the Hollywood Nights, 7, Chicago's only goth girl vigilante.
Cool. A Caped Crusader Dog Avenger team up. Artemis choked. You gonna get him, Magnus? You gonna show him? Chapter 20. No backing down, no giving in. I pick my fights, but fight to win. Though the Reaper draws near me, I cry, conquer or die. From conquer or die, I have no fear. I assume that's a Cape band. Magnus, excuse me, sir. Can we not dig at things, maybe? Perhaps? You've been being so good the whole stream. Why don't we keep that up, huh? Seven got us off the expo floor, through a service door, and back up some stairs to a hallway full of empty conference rooms waiting to be filled with seminars and speaker panels. I'd thought about Artemis off and on since meeting her at the fortress, between worrying about my parents, the TADA thing, I was wigging out about Atlas, etc. Our first meeting had involved a huge amount of overshare. Why? Maybe she'd simply decided, since I'd noticed she was technically a corpse, full disclosure, followed by mind wipe if I totally wigged was the smart move. Maybe. But at 15, I'd lost my best friend in the world that hurt so bad I felt like I was dying. She'd lost both her parents and her entire life. I couldn't imagine it. If she'd become a goth girl and a vigilante, at least she took out her frustrations constructively. I'd probably have just laid down, quit. Maybe she needed a friend. So I studied up. Or I tried to. Since she was a night-stalking vigilante who wasn't dumb enough to leave a calling card, there weren't a lot of Artemis stories going around. Local police thought she might be responsible for some beatdowns, late-night saves, changes of criminal business location, apparently a gang-free territory spanning several urban blocks. Some of the local business owners probably had an arrangement with her. But to police, she was a person of concern, but the local precinct wasn't about to devote time and resources to catching someone who actually lowered their crime numbers, at least as long as she didn't step over the line. Where was the line, anyway? Seemed to pretty much be, don't kill anybody, don't beat up anyone we don't think deserved it, and don't make us take official notice. She was so good at keeping it quiet that even the tabloids, which still reported Elvis sightings, they weren't writing about her at all. Which made her reappearance out in the open at MetroCon a little alarming, even though I'd figured out how she'd done it. Break into the convention center at night, stay away from windows, duh. Thanks for the privacy, Seven, I said as he closed the door behind us. Can you give us a minute? Don't think so. If you want to stay uninterrupted, I need to stick around. Besides, this sounds interesting. You might need me. Listen, pretty boy. Please. I stopped Artemis before she began. Really, though, Seven said, suddenly serious for the first time since we'd been introduced. It startled me. I don't have jurisdiction in Chicago. Astra does, even if she's a trainee, so if something's not right, I'll follow her lead. That includes keeping quiet, too. A cocked eyebrow dared her to question his word. She ground her teeth, attempting a rictus of a smile. Neither of you wants a piece of this. Trust me. She looked us both over, then gave up. Fine. I'm after a shapeshifter named Ildopio, the doppelganger. He's here to kill Balder, publicly and messily. Why? Seven asked, before I could open my mouth. Shortest version? Balder's spoken out in favor of some form of federal superhuman registration and supervision. Moderately, mind you. He's no nutjob like Senator Davis was. So a supervillain wants to kill him for it? Is he insane? Nope. He's paid. My source thinks the guys who contracted Ildopio want to create a pro-legislation backlash. Wait, you're saying the plan is to make it look like Balder was killed by an anti-government crazy for expressing his opinion? But who would benefit? Seven asked. I realized my heart was racing. I could think of someone. Dark A. Fit his program, after all. So how did you get involved? Ildopio is wanted by 7 countries and Interpol. In the US, there's a death warrant out on him. Only a DNA test will identify him, so he's been impossible to catch, but I got a source who keeps an eye out for me. He tripped over this particular contract. How are you going to find him? I've got a blood sample. If I get close enough, I'll be able to smell him.
Seven ran his hands through his hair. "You gonna keep this to yourself? Jesus Christ!" I thought the same thing without the profanity, but I waved him down. "Artemis, what's your plan?" "Not as wide open as all that. To get the needed political juice out of it, Il Doppio has to make the hit in a way that pins the blame on superhumans and, like you said, anti-government crazies. So he's going to impersonate a known anti-government superhero or supervillain, do it up close and personal, plenty of witnesses. If he doesn't stage it right, won't get paid. He's supposed to take the shot during the cosplay competition, since Balder's one of the judges, certain to be recorded. So if you can't find Il Doppio before then, you'll get Balder out of harm's way?" The death rictus grin came back. "No, I'm going to let Il Doppio take his shot and punch his ticket before he can get away afterward. Because if he can't take his shot, his orders are to perpetuate a random massacre before he bugs out. All for the cause." An hour later, we were back on the expo floor. We had a plan. Me, I wanted to quietly blow the whistle on the whole thing and let the manhunt commence, but Seven actually came around to Artemis's fallback strategy. With some additions, he said it checked all the boxes. Reduce possibility of collateral damage, catch the hitman, expose the plot. Of course, if we couldn't make it all look spontaneous, we were going to be swimming in the deep stuff for not reporting it to the proper authorities. I agreed to it because it had the best chance I could see of thwarting the bad guys, while keeping Artemis the urban legend she was. The first part would be easiest, since Quinn, bless her, had originally signed Blackstone and Atlas up to be one of the 2 of the 4 cosplay judges. In a lucky coincidence, of course, Balder and Seven were the other 2, so we'd be right there together, and Artemis could easily get in as a contestant or an audience member. Seven felt sure that since he'd become involved in the desperate mess, his luck would bring it around in our favor. But the cosplay competition wasn't until 3 that afternoon, and I had things to do first. I was sweating. I was sweating with nervousness. "Can't believe you talked me into this." "Relax," Atlas whispered in my ear. "It'll be over before you know it." He gave me a push, and I stepped up to the starting square. Since the best outcome remained finding Il Doppio before 0 hour, Seven had traded me for Artemis. Hopefully she wouldn't kill him. He'd escorted me back to the VIP lounge first, and Atlas had taken me back out with him. I'd begun to feel like the little lady who'd needed to be squired about in public, but coddling me was hardly Atlas's intention. I took a deep breath and looked around at the cheering crowd as the announcer called out my name. The team versus team battles of the morning were finished, and they'd set the stadium up for track and field, the superhuman version of track and field, which the acrobatics event included free-strung hoops, lofty poles, elevated bars, spaced-out flag and ring stations. Despite the fact I'd been flying for less than 2 months, Atlas said I had to show willing. Let 'em see you when you're awful. They'll know you get better." Well, yippee skippy. I was determined not to be awful. All competing flyers flew the course once together. It started with an almost vertical launch to the top of a pole with an attached ring you had to hook, then down to a series of nearly ground-level hoops with a flag at the end, a slalom course of bridged poles with a second ring, a high and track-circling circuit of strung hoops with a flag at the tightest part of each end turn, and finally, a last ring to capture on the way back down to the starting square. You got points for time, staying in the course, and each flag and ring taken. The course was really all about control. Dreadnought, the powered armor-wearing gadgeteer who went just before me, had the speed, but only poor handling of his suit's heavy mass. His vision-obscuring helmet probably didn't help either. I winced when he lost control and took out several rings on the track. I had speed, but aerobatic ability? That wasn't great. But I'd paid careful attention to the way they'd scored Dreadnought, and thought I could at least not stink. Wasn't gonna be pretty. In fact, it'd probably go viral on ViewTube. I gave Atlas a last look and set my feet. When the starting horn blared, I launched myself. Angling my ascent so I hit the top of the pole at a steep angle, I hooked it using my hands like spikes and flipped around using the pole as an anchor. In the flip, I knocked the ring off its stand and accelerated it, on the way down, letting it slide up my arm. Accelerating hard, I twisted and kicked off from the base of the pole, less than a body length from the ground. The pole split with a crack as I shot into the hoop line, grazing the bottom of the first. At the end of the hoops, I grabbed the first flag in passing, then lifted higher and sped up again. The slalom poles were concrete. As I passed between them, I pulled tight somersaults, kicking off from the outer pole of each pair as I went by to change direction without losing speed, like a pinball bouncing between the bumpers. I had to play it straight for the circling track and nearly missed the hoops at the corners, but I got both rings and the flag at the end, then punched down in the square to finish it, impacting an explosion of sod and dirt. Bobbing up out of the crater, I heard wild whistles and cheers. Atlas even looked stunned. I laughed, giddy on adrenaline. The high pole had fallen, 3 of the slalom poles cantered crazily, and they needed to fill in my divot, but who cared? These were high-impact games, no points for style. I'd been the tail in the flying order, and when the judges announced the final rankings, the crowd went crazy, and I grabbed Atlas in an impulsive hug. He'd scored first place, an amazing flyer named Heaven Dancer had taken second, and I'd smashed my way to third. I decided to consider it a good omen for the more serious challenge to come. And I needed to think positive. 0 hour arrived with no call or text telling me that Seven and Artemis had neutralized the bad guy. Chapter 21. Vern-type superhumans, more often called gadgeteers, are probably the strangest superhumans around. They don't do impossible things, they make impossible things. In the pre-event comics, they were the Tony Starks, Reed Richards, power armor, jetpacks, robots, ray guns. If Vern's science design worked for anybody else, we'd be living in the world of tomorrow. Usually stuck in a workshop, if they aren't armored up to play in the field, they can make anything out of anything. And most of them I've met put the mad in mad scientist. Astra, notes from a life. The cosplay competition is one of the highlights of MetroCon, and while it's pretty freeform, it does have some rules. Would-be contestants present themselves at one of the event registration tables beforehand, in costume, and the convention officials manning the tables can deny registration if they judge the costume not family-friendly. This meant there would be no Mr. Magical Japanese Princess making me want to scrub my eyes with bleach, and I was very grateful for that as I looked over the crowd gathering in the hall. Some of them definitely came close. "We saw you win," Seven said, sliding into the seat beside me. "Congratulations." The judges' table sat on the right end of the stage. Contestants would enter on the left, take a turn up and back on the catwalk, projecting into the audience, make any costume-appropriate poses, and then exit left again. Boulder had yet to appear, and Atlas stood off stage, talking to a couple convention officials. "Where have you been?" "Searching for the perfect gift. No luck. And smile. This is supposed to be fun." "Fun?" "Like you were having in the arena. They showed it big screen down here. Pretty sure it's going in the convention's best hit clips, along with Dreadnought's little blooper reel." He shook his head. "Man's a veteran of the China War. I wonder... Oh, there's Boulder." He was right. An excited stir started in the back of the hall when Balder made his entrance. His power's light projection, and in costume, white leather pants and jackets with lots and lots of gold-plated buckles, he always emits a soft golden aura. Had piercing eyes, high cheekbones, a noble brow under blonde curls, and, well, a girl got weak just looking at him. He looked like a pagan god of light and beauty, knew it, and used it. He'd even named his ginormous yacht Hrindinghorni, after the Norse god's mythic ship. Both Atlas and Seven were good-looking men, but Balder? Balder was too beautiful to be real. Seven's laugh broke my distraction, and I blushed. He leaned in. "If it helps, tell yourself he's gay." "He is?" "No, and neither am I," he said with a laugh. "What's with your friend? She seems kind of cold." "Artemis?" He nodded. "She should be... There she is." He pointed toward the back, and I realized she'd made it in. She hugged the wall behind the last row of chairs. Quite a few other heroes had come to watch the contest. Rook and Dreadnought were both there, but she should have stood out more in her hooded black costume. I wondered if she was using some kind of "I'm not here" Jedi mind trick. She saw me look her way and shook her head. Drat. This is getting too... I began. Seven stopped me, tapping the base of the mic sitting in front of him, and I cringed. It was probably live from us to the sound box anyway. Just relax. We'll get you through it. Then Balder reached the stage, and Atlas joined us, sitting down and giving Seven a nod, tweaking his cape out of the way, and a practiced move I decided that I needed to learn. Is this... Oh, yeah, it's just an announcer. All right, people, he said as the lights dimmed and the event announcer stepped up to his freestanding mic.
Well, let's do this.
I'd always loved the costume contest, and Shelley and I had even competed in it the year before she died, but now I was a nervous wreck. Took all the poise I'd learned from years of troubleshooting for Mom at Foundation events to keep the bubbling panic off my face. After the officials closed the doors, Artemis circled through the crowd, then managed to maneuver herself close to the stage door to get a sniff of the contestants as they went up. Il Doppio couldn't get by her, so I watched the back as well as I could. When the lights came up on the first intermission, I breathed a sigh, though I really had no reason to feel relieved. He had to be in here with us. So why couldn't Artemis smell him? Even Seven was getting twitchy. Catching my stress, Atlas leaned in as we stood. Everything all right? Then, in the back of the hall, Dreadnought raised his arm, and I knew. I grabbed the heavy oak table and heaved it up, scattering pens, paper, and water bottles before the micro-missile he fired blew it apart, flinging chunks and slivers of oak around the hall. Screams of pain and shock from the audience punctuated the blast. The stage gave us no cover, but Seven spun Balder around, pushing him toward the wings, keeping between him and the hall. Atlas didn't hesitate, and the second missile exploded against his chest with no effect beyond strutting his suit. He launched himself over the screaming audience and across the room. Crashing down on Dreadnought, he ripped the missile-launching gauntlet off his suit before the heroes standing around them could react. I sagged with relief, then choked on a horrifying thought. Atlas! Get him out of here! He heard me, and he did, going straight up through the ceiling, since the hall was on the ground floor, through 2 more ceilings and into the open air before Dreadnought's armor exploded, knocking him out of the sky. Chapter 22. Rules of engagement in a civilian environment. Avoid an encounter with force if at all possible. Use only powers that can be applied without collateral damage. Use all powers that can be applied without collateral damage. Do not escalate, stop any escalation, and neutralize civilian risks as quickly as possible. The Chicago Sentinel's training manual. Dreadnought, a retired Vern-type super soldier and an actively blogging anti-government libertarian, must have seemed the perfect shooter for the plot, that we couldn't tell anyone about. With Il Doppio's body vaporized, Dreadnought would have been forever smeared as a wannabe assassin, if not for Atlas. When he ripped the gauntlet off, a couple fingers came with it. Ugh. Ugh. DNA analysis confirmed it had been Il Doppio in Dreadnought's armor. The subsequent investigation proved inconclusive, but the fact that Il Doppio had been a known hitman led the political pundits to draw the exact opposite conclusion from the one Artemis said his employers wanted them to draw. They never did find the real Dreadnought's body, poor man, never determined whether or not the self-destruct device installed in the armor had been triggered by Il Doppio or remotely. As for us, Seven explained our fast reaction by spinning a story of him telling me Dreadnought's horrible racing performance had bugged him, which was true, and he had, by sheer luck, focused my attention on the gadgeteer hero, which was also true. He didn't tell them about my horrified epiphany when I realized that whoever Il Doppio disguised himself as, Artemis would have snipped him out if he hadn't been wearing an environmentally sealed power suit. Fortunately, nobody in the crowd had gotten seriously hurt, but Seven's power actually scared me. The chain of serendipitous events that saved Balder went far beyond luck and over the Deus Ex Machina event horizon. Even Atlas's unintentional dismemberment of Ildopio had provided a lucky clue, allowing the investigators to clear the real dreadnought and thwart the intent of the attack. Of course, my shouted warning to Atlas meant the story Seven spun didn't fool him. Didn't even try. At least he waited to confront us till we were back at the dome. How could you have been so goddamn stupid? Seven, Rook, and Balder had come back to the dome with us. Blackstone and Ajax joined us in the assembly room. There, I'd related the whole story, holding back only my suspicion of who Ildopio's employer might have been. Atlas was almost speechless. Almost. It was my idea, Seven interjected before I could respond, not that I could have said anything coherent in my defense. So, Rook gets to kill you first, Atlas ground out without shifting his focus from me. There were no guarantees, Seven, Rook said calmly, other than that you wouldn't get hurt. Seven winced, and Blackstone rapped the table to get everyone's attention. I have read Seven's team file. While sometimes his luck operates on a simple you-missed-me basis, at other times it creates a veritable Rube Goldberg confluence of events. The fact that Astra, who knew Artemis, who knew about the planned assassination attempt, just happened to be a last-minute switch onto the judging panel Balder was on when the attempt was made, would seem to indicate that this was one of those times. Also, Seven's intent seems too often to drive events, and he certainly intended to protect his teammate. Balder nodded, turning to me. He'd been amazingly calm through the whole thing. Your friend, Artemis? She said that if the assassin couldn't get a shot at me, he'd shoot up the convention? I nodded, and he smiled dryly. I'm not that good an actor. If someone had told me to play a target, I'm sure that a professional like Ildopio would have gotten a good look at me and known the game was up. Might have just shot up the hall, or his controllers might simply have detonated him right there when he told them the game was blown. Rook and Ajax were nodding thoughtful agreement, but Atlas didn't join them. How you rule on Seven's actions is your own business, he said to Rook. But they took... Oh, this is Atlas. How you rule on Seven's actions is your own business, but they took a terrible risk, allowing a fight in a civilian environment without telling us. He went back to me, even agreeing it might have been a good decision to keep Balder in the dark. Telling me would have doubled the protection of the table. Telling Rook would have placed another alert party in the hall. Both of our teams could have been fully present and ready. He shook his head. One of the first and last rules of engagement in civilian environments. My throat had gotten so tight that I could barely breathe, but I held myself rigidly upright in my chair. Avoid an encounter with force if at all possible, and neutralize civilian risks as quickly as possible? Did you do that? I shook my head, and he sat back. You disregarded both the rules of engagement and team protocols. The normal course of things, at the very least, a detailed statement of censure would go in your file. Since, however, the full facts of the incident are not on the books, this action will certainly be written up as an impressive success, and the public will love it. But I am very disappointed. I nodded, my face cold. I must have been deathly pale. Think we're done, then. Rook nodded to the two of us with some sympathy, and Seven and I got out. Managed to make my exit with back straight and eyes dry, at least. Atlas was right. The public loved it. Since multiple convention goers had been taping the contest, they even managed to splice together a pretty good show out of it. Showed me exploding into action with Atlas right beside me, Atlas's long-range tackle, and his straight-up exit with the bad guy. Chatter dubbed it our first official mentor-sidekick adventure, and slivers from the table got sold on eBay. Seven didn't get credit at all, but on the bright side, there wasn't a whisper of Artemis's involvement, so that's really the only good thing to come out of it as far as I was concerned. Naturally, the attack and subsequent police proceedings had derailed the costume competition. The convention organizers managed to shuffle it to the second day, and when Atlas and I arrived for it, we were greeted by ringing applause. After that, I managed to avoid Atlas's company, except for our official hosting duties, and spent a lot of time wandering the convention with Seven, who seemed perfectly capable of shrugging off our secret disgrace. Let's try that again. Who seemed perfectly capable of shrugging off our secret disgrace. Astra, he said bluntly over pizza on Main Street. It's a messy world. We get lots of kick down the door, capture the bad guy jobs, briefings, prep work. Other times, the job jumps up and kicks us in the head without introducing itself. Yesterday, much closer to number 2. I focused on my pizza. He didn't understand. I didn't understand. I felt bad over my ongoing fight with Dad and Mom, but not this bad. I'd become as sensitive to Atlas's criticism as I was to his compliments, but seven was still wrong. We had hours to think about it, I said after swallowing. Belatedly, I thought of little elves. I got distracted by wanting to keep Artemis out of sight, and once we came up with the plan, I didn't think at all. At the very least, we should have had Atlas and Rook on board before Balder walked in the hall. Hindsight, etc. You're an infant in the business. I've been a cape for 2 years. You let it be my call. No bystanders got seriously hurt. You're the hero of the hour. You don't have to listen to me next time. It's all good. He slurped his Coke while wiggling his eyebrows at me, making me laugh. My mood lightened a little. He was still too full of himself, but he did make it very hard to mope. MetroCon ended with the El Paso Guard taking most of the NCAIC honors, and U.S. network reps optioned a man on the border law enforcement drama with them. They certainly deserved it, but still. Ugh. We attended the huge closing day party, where informal awards were invented and jokingly announced. Atlas and I won cutest couple, while I snagged sidekick of the year. The delivery of the first was on the raunchy side, the second a half-serious compliment, which, predictably, I felt guilty about. Equally as predictably, Seven saw and teased me out of it. We finished the evening with the Hollywood Nights and shook hands all round, Rook making me promise to visit them in California and Balder seconding him. Seven, with an eye on Atlas, gave me a playful kiss and promised to make my visit a fun one. I was left with one very long loose end. I had to find Artemis. Ooh, we've made it to chapter 4. We're really getting under it this fine evening. Oh, love a good water. While we're between chapters, I should note that that logo above my head, that little bug, well, it's not really a bug, it used to be a bug, it's circular, but that little logo above my head, the Codex, that's the Twitch team I'm on. They are all fellow reading streamers, and they all kind of run the gamut in regards to genre. They have their own little Discord where sometimes we will host events like book club, but most of the time it's just a good spot for everyone who really cares for reading streams to drop by. For example, Goriki, our lovely mod extraordinary, gives out a lot of information on managing active Twitch security that a lot of avenues I just never had considered before interacting. Like the way to automatedly handle bots, and like the concerns about people interacting with the terms of service in your chat, and like there's a million little aspects of keeping a Twitch stream safe that I just did not have the best grasp on before watching all of that, and I've been watching it very closely because I'm actually a moderator in several other chats, and I really should shore up the holes in those channels. Which reminds me, I have some things to suggest to Nate at some point. But yeah, that's Codex in a nutshell. We all basically do roughly the same thing, just in different fonts. And I think if you like paper cuts, you will love the rest of the Codex. And vice versa. If you like the Codex, you'll probably like me. Which is kind of the idea. But they're all great. And I do drop by several of their streams as often as I can. Not everyone streams in a schedule that I can drop by, or
If they did, I'd probably get nothing done because I'd be watching everybody read.
But, you know. Anyway, let's dive into part 4, chapter 23. In the comics that gave us the iconography of the superhero, Superman embodied a protector who flew in to save the day, while Batman epitomized the Avenger, who sometimes protected, but who also brought justice where society and the law failed. Protector and Avenger, they've shaped the two strongest superhero archetypes that have influenced the public's perception of superheroes in the real world. Although the Protector has a more obvious place in modern society, the Avenger's position is a bit more problematic. Professor Charles Gibbons on the New Heroic Age. Artemis disappeared after the attack, but she continued to prey on my mind. The federal warrant court, responsible for closing and payout on general warrants, awarded the bounty on Il Doppio to Atlas. He gave it to me, and I didn't want any of it. The thought of being paid for somebody's death was too moody for words. I would have followed the Sentinel's usual practice of donating all warrant awards to charity, except for the fact that it really should have gone to Artemis. Being without normal means of support, she could probably use it too. Trouble being, I had to find her again. I love when my internet decides that I'm not real. It's so nice. It's so great. I am working on that solution I was on about, by the way. That Wi-Fi dish. It turns out that running Ethernet cable through the hallway will be a good deal of fuss, so I'm gonna have to unpack the structure of these antennae on my Wi-Fi card. Which, honestly, I should just probably go see if they sell spare parts for this Wi-Fi card and just buy a couple spare antennas that way. One to break open and examine, and another one to break open and make into a dish, is what I really should do. But, you know, that's a process. That actually wouldn't be a bad idea. That wouldn't be a bad idea to do on a Tuesday night stream, you know, just to kind of calculate that sort of thing. Can I please be streaming? Oh, it might be catching back up. Give it a minute. What do we think? What do we think, library? Nope. No dice. I think the Wi-Fi card crashed. The trouble is, like, the longer into the stream we get, the more I worry about that Wi-Fi card overheating. I need to redo the fans in my computer. That's another thing that's kind of mildly pressing that I really should work on, is redoing the fans, because my fans are optimized for a completely different, like, setting that my computer is no longer in. They were designed the airflow in that case to handle being in like a high cabinet that has air conditioning blasting at the top of it, so it was doing top intake. But nowadays, with where it is situated, I should really invert I should invert a good chunk of the fans so it vents hot air out the top. Things even running? Oh, one of them is. It must not be too bad in there. Anyway. After a few evenings waiting for her at the fortress, I asked the staff about her and learned she wasn't a regular. Once or twice a month, tops. If I wanted to cross paths with her, I'd have to meet with her on her turf. My earlier research had given me a South Side neighborhood to focus on, so I used the dome's link to the police database to list all unsolved multiple murders in the area for the last 5 years. Bingo. Her name was Jacqueline Sigler. Her parents were Fred and Charlene Sigler, and 4 years ago, someone had killed the whole family in their home, supposedly with attack dogs? They never found her body, listed her as missing, and presumed dead at the age of 20. I checked the property registry and learned the home had never been resold. After some thought, I decided it was only proper to visit at night. She probably slept the whole day, after all, to avoid a terminal sunburn, if for no other reason. And I hated getting calls after bedtime myself. The old two-story sat in the middle of a dead yard, and all its doors and windows were tightly boarded up. I'd located the real estate company that worked for the bank that held the property and gotten a blueprint. It had not only a basement, but also a root cellar that had been expanded during Prohibition to hold profitable and questionable liquid assets, as it were. Very, very promising. Letting myself in through an upstairs window felt like entering a cave. The boarded-up windows admitted no light, and there weren't any heat sources for my supervision to work with. Fortunately, I had brought a policeman's flashlight, but it was still plain spooky. Creeping through the house, I found the place had been stripped, even of fixtures, leaving a corpse of a home. But while the house was empty, the walls were unmarked. There wasn't a trace of litter anywhere. Nobody had ever camped here or tagged the place. Interesting, and a little scary. Downstairs, I found the stairs to the cellar and the kitchen, and almost chickened out. Okay, so I was badder than anything that could possibly be down there, but I'd only been super bad for a few weeks. Shelley and I had screamed our heads off over a lot of movies our parents had known nothing about, and in every one of them, exploring a basement in the dark didn't end well. Knock, knock, I called down the stairs before starting down. The basement echoed, empty even of junk. I found the root cellar door at the back, a metal door with a solid lock. The kind a serial killer keeps his victims behind, or bodies. Stop that, it's just a door. I knocked, and nobody answered. After long minutes, I took a breath and reached for the handle, and let my hand drop. My upbringing defeated me. I had every reason to believe Artemis's home was on the other side of the door, and I'd never broken into someone's home. Stupidly, I hadn't brought anything to leave a note on either. Way to go, Nancy Drew. Sighing, I turned to go and found her standing right behind me. I screamed and dropped the flashlight, flinching back against the door. The flashlight broke, dropping the cellar into darkness even my super-duper vision couldn't pierce. Till she clapped and the lights came on. Seeing her didn't help. What are you doing here? Peeing myself because someone wants to play monster, apparently. I shot back, trying to breathe again. Why don't you answer your door like a normal person? She grabbed my throat and tried to shake me, but I braced, past scared into mad. Strong as she was, she might as well have tried to shake a statue. Giving up, she fixed her gaze between my eyes. Don't try any Jedi mind tricks. I wrote everything down back at the dome. I wake up tomorrow with zip in my head. I know why. Get out. She drew both of her guns. Yeah, like that'll work. She put the one in her right hand, about an inch from my eye, and pulled the trigger. Bang. Damn it. I grabbed for her, was blinking and squinting. She missed it and was gone. Put my back to the door and slid down it to sit. I felt vaguely nauseated, but now that we'd spit at each other, I wasn't going anywhere until it was settled. I rubbed my stinging eye and held back a sniffle. Like that was going to happen. A minute passed, and then another. With a click, the door pushed gently against my back. You might as well come in, Artemis said behind me. This, I breathed in the heavenly aroma, has to be the best latte I've ever had. How's your eye? A little blurry, but getting better. No permanent damage. Sorry about trespassing. We sat at a kitchen table in the root cellar, a cheerfully lit room decorated with framed nature posters from around the world. Chinese screens corded off the corner of the room where she kept her bed. She'd equipped the cellar with a flat-screen TV and entertainment center, computer desk, wardrobe, and, wonder of wonders, a kitchenette rigged like a Starbucks. She saw me looking at it. The bootleggers who expanded the root cellar made it a distillery with water in the drain. My father rigged it with full plumbing. I nodded, then started to giggle. What? She'd taken off her mask and put her hood back. Her long black hair, pulled back tightly into a tail, matched her eyes. She looked like a borderline anorexic gothic cheerleader, and had a pleasantly low voice when she wasn't putting an edge on it. The corner of my mouth quirked up. This is a vampire's lair. I pitched my voice as deep as it would go, trying for sepulchral, then giggled again. There's a panda on your wall. Damned if I'm gonna sleep in a coffin just because a psycho thought he was Vlad the freaking Impaler. If I'm stuck on a liquid diet, it's gonna be the tastiest stuff I can brew. You should try my hot chocolate. How about ice cream? Frozen liquid. Girl can't live without it. Why are you here? Okay, alright, to the point then. I opened my mouth and then closed it. Finally, I said, because I really need a friend right now. She sat back, dark eyes shadowed. I just won the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes. They're waiting outside with a poster-sized check. I looked down at my latte and chose my words carefully. A month ago, I was a reasonably happy, normal high school grad. Now, I've seen people die, nearly died myself twice. Half the time I feel like a fraud. The only ones in my new life I can talk to about it are my parents or the people I work with. Not a good idea if I want them to treat me like an adult. So why me? Because you've got a panda on your wall because your future changed too and you're not curled up in the corner eating the paint. It should be a basket case, but instead you're Artemis, scourge of bad people. You need to tap that right now. Not a role model for anybody. It's not what I mean. It's like if I stand close to you, some of it'll rub off. I met her gaze and she looked deep, trying probably to sort out the truth from the bullshit. My eyes prickled and I realized it was all true. I called in the fight, she said, casually, playing with her empty cup. What? The rumble with the Brotherhood and the Sanguinary Boys. Both gotten too big. Couldn't take some of them on myself, so I watched them. Called it in. She got up and refilled her cup, still talking. Missed it over there, watched the whole thing. Saw your fight. You did pretty good. Did pretty good at MetroCon, too. Well, thank you? I'm just saying, you look like you knew what you were doing. She picked up a copy of Hero Beat and showed me the cover. On it, I smiled for the camera in a classic fists on hips pose, looking very cheeky. I grinned. That was a fun photo shoot. I'll bet. Not my world. So, never had a girlfriend with more stuff? That got a laugh, then a frown. No more team-ups. I've got street cred to maintain. I'm thinking more along the lines of extreme shopping. She sat down, still studying me. So where do we start? With a proper introduction. I took a deep breath. Fair was fair. I'm Hope Corrigan. Pleased to meet you. Oh, and this check? It's for you. That's right. This is the first person that Hope properly, drops her secret identity to. I mean, sure, friends from school, whatever. We expect this. But, this is the first person that she, intentionally is like, hi, I'm a real normal person. Anyway, chapter 24. No, we're not your daddy's villains. We're not chillin', then we're killin'. We want you. You best be willing. Yeah, I can't rap, but that's from Murder Night by Freak Zone. Artemis conducted regular and random patrols, but she did a lot of her surveillance remotely. It's easy to plant cameras and bugs when you can mist in and out of anywhere. After that night, we started meeting at the fortress just after sunset a few nights a week. We got along well. She called me Little Miss Sunshine, and I called her a blood-sucking fiend of the night. One night, just before Thanksgiving, found us at the Sentinel's table, sipping drinks and cape-watching. 3 weeks and I was coming home. Yes! I'd finally started planning how to introduce Artemis Jackie to the bees. Tonight, Wisteria sat at a table with her deliciously muscled sidekick. I hope it went well. We'd talked a couple of times, and really, he was pretty nice. By now, I could recognize the real capes among the sidekicks and wannabes. I could even tell the difference if they were from out of town, partly because the beautiful people in the room were less likely to be working heroes. People come in all shapes and sizes, after all, and a breakthrough doesn't usually include a physical transformation. Capes are more likely to be physically fit than the average civilian, mind, but so are cops, and I've seen a lot of donut hounds in uniform. Despite the reality, the old comic book stereotypes remained. I smiled, thinking of Atlas's muscle suit. The actors and actresses who played capes on TV and in the movies always looked good and fit, even the ones not in romantic roles. I'd be willing to bet the actress they picked to play me in the next season of Sentinels would be taller, a lot taller. Wondered if the model who'd done me at MetroCon could act. Looking at Wisteria, I sighed. Whoever they picked would certainly be much better endowed. Superheroines in the comic books always seem to be at least teacups, possess some kind of amazing anti-gravity powers. In reality, a lot of padding, much more gratuitous than mine, went on. It was the same principle as Atlas's suit, after all. I eyed Artemis as she listened to the band Crash Course. A new hero band ensemble, they were actually pretty good. They fronted for Have No Fear. Like Wisteria, Artemis fit the stereotype of the hot Amazon. Not a D-cup, mind, but tall, curvy, in an obviously fit way. Unlike lots of capes, she could play herself on TV just fine. From what she'd told me about her high school life, she'd been one of those "you can hate me because I'm beautiful" kind of girls. I sighed again, and she said something. "What? So you guys ready?" she repeated. "Right." I told her about President Touch's Cloud's scheduled visit. Another sigh with a twist of laughter. "It's not until December, but the Secret Service liaison's already doing a threat review of all known V&Vs. That's villains, vigilante. Includes yous. Villains, vigilantes. It includes you. Blackstone's ready to kill him. And the president wants to go fly over the city with Atlas and me. Her security detail hates the idea as much as Atlas does, so I've got another book of procedures to memorize, courtesy of the Secret Service." When I'd first heard the news, I'd thought of how much the Secret Service must hate having to try and protect an aerokinetic president who could fly. "So," my earbud chirped and I jumped. "Sorry, excuse me a moment." I leaned back and put my hand to my ear. "Yes?"
"My dear lady," came Blackstone's voice, "it appears we're needed at the Freak Zone concert. Can you be at the Dome in 5 minutes?"
"Yes, sir. Riot?"
"Please, no. The bees were there." It was all Annabeth talked about on our last web call.
"Oh my, yes. On the program, in any case." I bit my lip. "Can I bring help?"
"If she's willing."
"Most definitely." "Right. 5 minutes." So he'd know. Have to ask him how and see if the old magician would reveal one trick. I disconnected. "Emergency. Can you come?" Artemis gave me a look. What did I say about team-ups? "Please, this could be bad. Blackstone thinks it's a good idea. I've got friends there." She didn't ask where there was. I held my breath. "Let's go." She dropped some cash on the table. I flew more slowly than normal, and she followed a long, barely visible fog in the night. We arrived at the Dome together. Landing, I realized the bay's security system wasn't going to recognize her. Before I could decide what to do, the doors opened and my earbud chirped again. "Bring her down to the lobby." Meeting us there, he gave Artemis a polite nod. "Pleased to meet you, Artemis. Astra, if the two of you could proceed to the assembly room, most of the rest are ahead of you." No! This isn't happening. "Do you know how long I've managed to stay under the radar?" Artemis muttered. "Not as long as you think, but thanks for coming." I squeezed her hand as I pulled her along. We stood around the assembly room table, Artemis looking very stiff in the present company. I wasn't the only one who had invited a guest to the party. Rush had brought Euphoria with him. Where had they been? She looked much more confident in her place at the table. Chakra had informed us that in deep tantric meditation she'd gotten a flash of a hugely bad karmic event about to land on us. She'd fallen off her partner. Her words, and I so didn't want to know, hit the general alarm and gotten Blackstone in the loop before she'd even dressed. Atlas stepped in when she finished. "So here's what we know. Our takedown of the Brotherhood and Sanguinary Boys hasn't set too well with some folks. At least 5 of them missed the dance, being away on jobs or in jail. Since then, they've gotten together. Also got more minions than we knew about." Yes, minions. I had no idea how cult-like a hardcore supervillain culture had become. The bees and I were going to have a talk. "Some of them are bending the ear of the press, and they brought some pretty slick shysters who are trying to claim the deaths were due to excessive violence on our part. That's the background, anyhow." He tapped an E-pad, and an overhead display of the Harris Theater popped up. "Chakra foresaw right starting at the Freak Zone concert. Our best guess is the leftover brothers, boys, and all them little friends have decided to go rampaging. Gonna spill out of the Harris Theater, and an army of unhappy fans with a few dozen minions and a
Handful of villains mixed in, gonna tear downtown Chicago apart, right in the shadow of the dawn. I braced myself, but I still felt my face go white. The bees and their dates were going to be in the middle of that. Villains and minions and rioters aside, there were going to be a lot of people guilty of no more than questionable taste, bad judgment, all in the crowd. Can we shut it down? I still felt under a cloud, but I had to ask. No, precognitive visions aren't legally recognized, so we can't show cause. Best we can do is alert the CPD bad things are about to happen, which we've done. Word from us should mean something, but that new chief don't like us very much. Reckon we upstage his boys in uniform too often. Ajax snorted. Blackstone shook his head as Atlas continued. So, I don't know how much attention they'll pay at the top. It's gotta go down through the proper channels. Concert's in progress now, anyhow. If we tried to shut it down, might just spark the riot early. Can't try and bottle it up either. Harris Theater's underground. They'll be swarming up the lobby stairs, trying to keep them in. Gravity will kill dozens. Same for the tunnel and the parking lot. Bottle them up as close packed as they'll be. There'll be trampolines for certain. Folks won't think too kindly of all that. No keeping this horse from busting loose. So we're going to let out a shoot. Keep it in the crowd. 10 minutes later, I stood on top of the Harris Theater, Atlas and Artemis beside me, looking down at Randolph Street. Low clouds glowed with reflected city light, giving the night a weird, silvered quality. The plan seemed simple enough, really. Nimbus, the Harlequin, and Ajax stood ready below us, inside the Millennium Park garage. Any riders that came out would be funneled right into Nimbus, and she could strobe blind the entire crowd as often as necessary. It's hard to rampage when you're blind or covering your eyes, and Quinn and Ajax could probably handle anyone not affected. Blackstone waited with Rush and Euphoria on Upper Randolph just west of us. He'd conjured up several lines of police cars with troopers to the east and west of the theater, as well as in the turnaround. If we could herd the crowd away from Randolph, turn it south, and back into Millennium Park, it'd take them time to run east or west out of the park. They'd be thinning out and getting tired on the way. With real police and lots more capes pouring in from around the city once the dispatch got the APB out, it could really end well. 3 of us on the roof were mobile reserve. Sounded like a good scratch plan, but the idea of trying to corral the herd worried me. The herd would be 1,000 rioters. While I felt better for the items Ajax had slipped me, this was still going to be bad. I watched my breath fog in the cold November air and tried not to think about the bees down in there somewhere. Artemis, Atlas said, making me jump. Boss. He smiled. For tonight, yes. I want to do you a favor. Or I want you to do me a favor, rather. He waved at the street. There's going to be close to 1,000 pissed off fans busting out the doors below us, but they're not the problem. Villains and minions will be the problem. Villains will bring powers, and minions will be armed. They'll pose the worst threat to police as they come in. We might not be able to sort them out, since a lot of the fans are dressed in villain wear for after-concert parties. So, if you can identify the villains they're bad boys, I want you to shoot them. Speechless, I must have made a noise, because he looked my way and smiled. Only a little, of course. Legs, maybe. Can't raise much of a ruckus if you're busy not bleeding out. Artemis nodded. That won't be a problem. Atlas started to say something else, then cocked his head, obviously listening to someone on his earbud. Here they come! Rush called over the dispatch link as the lobby doors burst open. The sound of so many voices raised in anger, harsh with rage, raised the hair on the back of my neck, triggering primal fears. There's a reason why we have a specific word for an angry crowd. Mob. The emerging mob paused to mill and thicken as they were pushed from behind. 1 breath, 2, then they tipped over in a rush, straight down Randolph for Michigan Avenue, paying absolutely no attention to the police barrier in their way. Some threw bottles. Maybe 5 or 6 pulled pistols and started popping shots at the police. None of them slowed down. Then Blackstone's illusory police squads vanished as the mob poured over his position, suddenly hidden from sight by a flowing black fog that drowned the light. Blackstone! Atlas yelled, launching off the roof with me right behind him.
We hit the mob and weren't gentle. Surrounded by screaming rioters, I couldn't see any of our guys through the weird fog. Then I hit a pocket of dazed and very happy fans and saw Euphoria. She lay on the ground, but the guys who downed her sat or sprawled around her, blissed out. Beyond her, a man in a long coat pointed a gun at a figure on the ground. I launched myself, knowing I'd be too late, but Artemis missed it in behind him and fired. He went down screaming and clutching his leg. Then I was there, kneeling beside Blackstone. His eyes were open and tracking, but his scalp bled freely. Probably a thrown bottle. I carefully scooped him up. Where the hell was Rush? A blur and repeated sharp zaps answered that question. Somewhere in the fog, he danced through the mob, lashing out with his taser gloves as he went. Beside me, Artemis tossed the fallen minion's pistol back toward the theater and missed it again as I leapt into the air and out of the fog. Astra Group A, has Blackstone been located? Sorry, get him out now. Thank God. Get back here quick. I laid Blackstone down on the theater roof and quickly checked him over. The old gentleman stiffened and focused on me as I felt my way around the gash on his head. I'm fine, dear girl. Chakra's with me, if a little preoccupied at the moment. Run along. I checked his eyes again. His wide pupils matched, and I sighed, relieved. I'll be back, I promised, wrapping him in one of the emergency blankets from the gear we'd flown in with us before letting him send me away. Atlas! I called, stepping off the building as dispatch connected us again. Now that I had a moment to think, I felt stupid. I know what the fog is. Freak Show's drummer is kind of a particle controller. His name's Blackout. Usually uses it for stage effects. You know what he looks like? Tall, thin, bald, pasty white, probably in black. Artemis's ugly brother. I dropped down to where I'd left Euphoria. The mob had swept past, leaving the poor fools she'd buzzed, the leg shot guy, and a trail of tased rioters. I could feel their rage smashing I could hear the rest smashing their way down Randolph toward Michigan Avenue, still under the fog. I found Euphoria struggling to get out from under one of her limp and happy victims and helped her up. Her eyes were wide. Shit, where were you? I ignored that. Can you handle what's left here? She looked around and nodded. What happened? I have no idea. If any heroes or police come this way, send them west. And I flew to catch up with the fight. Now I blessed Ajax's foresight. Neither the Sentinels nor the normal CAIs were equipped or trained to handle mobs of normal people. Why not? Well, our job was emergency aid, handling supervillains. We didn't use our powers on norms unless firearms or other means of death were in play. But more specifically, we were not to be used by the government, city, state, or national against ordinary citizens. That was the deal. Which left us completely unprepared for tonight, but not completely. Atlas had obviously put some thought into it because he handed me several thick spools of tape on the way out with some quick instructions. He called it glue tape, and it was basically duct tape on steroids, the non-stick side coated with some kind of substance that reacted to the sticky side once the sticky was exposed to air when you peeled it. Wrap the tape around somebody, bonds tight as though it had melted together. Knives and patience can cut it, but most people don't carry knives. So, now I was going to have some fun. I flew into the fog and visibility dropped close to zero. Even with my enhanced vision, I couldn't see more than 15 or 20 feet. Pounding north along Michigan Avenue, the rioters danced and capered like madmen, throwing improvised firebombs, overturning cars, breaking windows. They ignored the evening diners and theatergoers caught on the street, unless they bumped right into them, concentrating instead on gleeful destruction. Since even I couldn't see far in the black, I could only find them by their noise. Fortunately, they liked to bunch up. I began dropping on clumps of rioters. Zzz. Hang on, I've got a roll of duct tape that would be perfect for Foley. Where did I put it? Oh, I know I have a roll of duct tape in this house. I was just using it the other day. Oh, man. So I'm picturing duct tape noises that kind of like... Of course I can't find the roll of duct tape. The second I actually, need it in a moment. Nope. No dice. Oh, you know what? It might be on the back of my table. Here. Nope. Disregard. No duct tape sounds. Sad face. Hey, future me, edit a duct tape noise in here. Grab a leg, tape it to somebody else's leg, bind arms to sides or leg, a few to heads. A few seconds' work reduced 5 rioters to a stuck cluster, incapable of going anywhere, until someone cut them out anyway. I flew down on group after group as bystanders ran for cover in the black fog, breaking up knots of rioters who ran into victims by accident. The repeated snap of Rush's tasers told me he was keeping busy, but I had no idea what was happening to anyone else, and I wasn't going to call out. We all had our situations to handle. Anyone who needed me could get to me through dispatch. Whenever I heard gunshots, I wondered if it was minions or Artemis. Presently, I heard police sirens from all directions and sighed, Chicago's finest responding at last. The black fog began to blow away. Someone probably had found Blackout, and I saw capes coming in as the more mobile CAI members arrived. We were getting it under control. Then, through a break in the thin fog, I saw a pack of rioters screaming curses and flipping a taxi. I almost called out their names. Dane and the Bees were howling with the rest of the pack. Before I could do anything, someone big and heavy landed on me and tried to twist my head off. I dropped and rolled us both into a parked car. Its alarm wailed a protest, but he didn't let go, and long claws scraped across my face. He hadn't had claws before. I panicked. Elbow punching backward, I broke something and he fell off me. Rolling to my feet, I found myself staring down at Freak Show, Chicago's very own villain rapper celebrity. It had to be him. His breakthrough had given him total control over his own body, and he could morph into any animal form he wanted, even mixing them up. During his act, he usually morphed into a kind of toothy, scaly half-snake thing or a lion man, both shapes carefully styled to look nasty and cool for the audience. I'd seen pictures. Now he morphed without thinking, pulling out every fearful image evolution had ingrained on our hindbrains, the things we made our nightmares out of. His broken arm knit itself back as I watched, and he looked up at me with deeply crazy eyes. I know. Near invulnerability, right? The snarling, spitting, slavering monstrosity screamed and pounced. The snarling, spitting, slavery monstrosity rolled on the street till I taped it to a handy fire hydrant and howled till I taped its jaws shut and damn near mummified its head, carefully leaving its nostrils clear. It morphed in disgusting waves, but more layers of tape defeated it. As I turned to go after the Bees, it went limp and turned back into a guy. And every rioter on the street stopped. Fight was over. Oh, isn't that convenient? Stop the snake by taking off its head, huh? Fair enough. Yeah, it's like this is something that I think a lot of superheroes broadly are very poorly prepared for is riot control. It's a difficult thing at the best of times. Even if you have overwhelming power, there's a lot of people and you got to keep as many of them safe as you can. So it kind of makes sense when you think about it anyway. I think we've got time for one more chapter before we call it an evening. But in the meanwhile, I'm going to once again remind you that this is a podcast that you can go listen to in your favorite podcatcher or on the website itself. I also have a YouTube page where I post VODs in case you get too far behind. The VODs go up on Saturdays. I also stream Tuesday nights, usually a miscellaneous stream. It tends to be either video games or making something. Sometimes, if I'm feeling particularly creative, we'll even manage to do some solo tabletop gaming. Perhaps if I can manage to wrangle a schedule together, I would love to host a full tabletop game, a little bit of actual play. Perhaps even of this game. Something to consider. What else? I feel like I'm always missing something. Oh yeah, Discord. We do indeed have a Discord that you can come hang out in. It's great for suggesting books to read, suggesting authors I should go get in contact with if you want me to read their books, talking about the things I've been working on, talking about things you've been working on, that whole spiel. It's a great time. I really suggest it. Anyway, let's dive into our last chapter for the night, chapter 25. Attack one foe to win another. Kill with a borrowed sword. One tree falls for another. From 36 Stratagems. We'd been played, and it didn't take long to understand how, though why had us beat. The rioters were quickly rounded up, a fairly easy job since they'd remained freaky cohesive for a mob. Ambulances and fire trucks filled the street. Victims were found, treated, taken away, fires put out. It'd take longer to clean up all the broken glass. Michigan Avenue sparkled dangerously under the streetlights. Atlas pulled us together, and we all, except for Artemis, who hung around as mist, nobody noticed, made our reports for the police. Then we headed back to the dome. Nobody said much. We'd been beaten, and we knew it. Atlas called all of us except Blackstone back to the assembly room. He looked us over as we slumped around the table, a far less pretty team than had left earlier that night. To bring everyone up to date, Group B in the garage was successful. Blind steers were still blind, and the mob never made it up the ramps. A few torched cars and broken windows, easily dealt with. Up on the street now, there we got outplayed. Anybody notice anything peculiar before they got away from us? They didn't stop. They saw Blackstone's police lines, but they didn't stop. They should have at least slowed down. I saw nods around the table. Another fact, nobody stayed in the theater, not one of them. Entire audience, the band, technicians, staff, they all took part in the rampage. Then there's the way it ended. More nods, and Ajax swore. Yep, just before they came out to play, Chakra told me she felt someone playing with them. Villains, minions, fans, crew, some kind of mentalist. Used the focus of the concert, drive them all to a frenzy, and then guided the explosion. That's why, beginning to end, they stayed together.
What stopped it?
Ajax grinned. I did, Chakra said, her voice thin and washed out. I fought a psychic battle with the one responsible. I don't think I would have won if he hadn't been spreading himself so thin. Or I might not have won at all. He might have simply accomplished his goal and left.
He?
He. Mind control. Well, shit, Rush swore. Silence fell around the table. Mentalists of various types were common enough since the event. Even with Barlow's guide, I had a hard time keeping them straight. But not many were capable of outright mind control, and nobody had ever heard of a mentalist capable of sweeping up whole crowds. Just the thought terrified me. Now it's time for me to admit my mistake. Atlas pressed on. I've always drawn a hard line on heroes being used against civilians. That hasn't changed, but we should have had a game plan prepared anyhow. Next time we'll have to try riot control, we will. We're going to develop equipment, tactics, so when this happens again, we'll be able to shut it down fast. Don't suppose anyone's considered our new nemesis went easy on us. Mob focused on property damage. Few bystanders got attacked, but sure, our puppeteer could have easily just painted Michigan Avenue in blood tonight, or made them all turn on each other in the theater. This was a demonstration, not an attack. Need to be prepared for the next one. The meeting broke up on that cheerful note, but Chakra intercepted Artemis and me on my way out. Blackstone wanted to see us. We found him resting in one of the infirmary beds, out of his tux for the first time since I'd met him, face pale beneath the bandages swathing his head, and Chakra took his hand.
Dear ladies, how good of you to come visit an old man.
His eyes crinkled at the corners.
Do not fear for disturbing my rest. Chakra and Dr. Beth are keeping me awake for a while in any case.
He tapped the bandage.
Precaution, you know.
Then he sobered. Now to business.
Artemis,
he waved her forward.
You doubtless have reservations, and perhaps wonder if Astra outed you. Not a bit. When not working my magic, I'm the intelligence specialist of the team, and I've been aware of you from police reports and other sources for some time. I kept an eye on her research when several of the queries she made through the Dome's network raised red flags. Following the breadcrumbs she inadvertently left, I was able to pull together the story of your origin. May I say, my dear, I'm very sorry for your losses." He stopped to give her a chance to comment and went on when she didn't. "I'm certain you think it intolerably rude of me. Please consider part of our purpose is to protect those not empowered as we are from abuse by our kind. It's both a good deed and good sense to do so. I must candidly say that your methods do not bear the closest scrutiny. The police ignore you because you terrorize the right people, and your tactics, sometimes harsh, have stopped short of murder. It's time to come in from the cold, however. Indeed, you've got no choice, and here we owe you an apology." "Why?" Artemis asked, her voice chilled. "You were seen by dozens tonight. People are dead. None by your hand, of course, but you left holes in a few deserving fellows this evening, which means the police must take notice. They despise mysteries forced to their official attention. Here I must pause. Thank you for my life, even. I'm in your debt. We'll do what we can. It's probable the DSA will become involved as well." The Department of Superhuman Affairs. She almost missed it away on the spot. "As to what happens next, I believe the police do not have to know too much. We have the resources to help you create a new life for yourself if you wish, and I would like to offer you a job." She started to speak, and he shook his head, wincing. "At least consider it. Despite Chakra's help, I'm getting too old for field work. Tonight I was a hindrance, not an asset. My best uses are strategic now, but this will leave a hole in our field lineup. You did very good work tonight. I think you may have a talent for my line of work. After all, you certainly did a good job staying out of sight for many years." He frowned. "Indeed, I would ask you in any case. I believe the game has changed tonight. We'll need all the help we can get." It's no fun when you drop the ball. If we hadn't gotten Chakra's premonition out of the rampage and simply had flown out and done our best once it kicked off, all would have been well image-wise, but we'd seen it coming and still failed to shut it down at the start. The media was not kind. The riot had killed 3, a Somali tax driver and his fare, and injured a lot more, and it was our fault. The plan that should have worked, we still stopped half of the rioters cold, still didn't give us any credit. Like the rest of the audience, Dane and the Bees recovered with complete memories of the riot, but no idea why they'd done it, beyond wanting to smash the world. Other than bruises and scratches, none of them were badly hurt, thank God. But Julie stopped talking to me for a while, and Annabeth cried a lot. Memories of clubbing an unlucky pedestrian, Megan told me, and loving it. I knew all about shame and the need to blame someone else, but as bad as the media reaction got, the legal outcome was so much worse. The Brotherhood and Sanguinary Boys' lawyers immediately moved for a dismissal of all charges on grounds of mind control. They pointed out that the supervillains and minions arrested were no more culpable than the fans who took part in the rampage, and asserted that the clock tower fight the other gang members had been arrested for was an equally manipulated event, a sort of peace conference pushed out of control. In their motion, they claimed that the same unknown enemy had controlled both events, with the intent of destroying both supervillain gangs, and the DA's office agreed with them. In their defense, I could understand why. Under the circumstances, state prosecutors would have found it impossible to get convictions. The media already called the unknown villain Syjack, and local analysts speculated endlessly on his motives for trying to take down the brothers and the Sanguinaries. Political pundits used the riot to ramp up their call to absorb the Sentinels and CAI teams into the Chicago Police Department, despite the fact we'd been the first responders. So, both supervillain gangs were back on the streets, though a few of their minions had to cop weapons charges. Atlas looked half ready just to kill them all and be done with it. Chakra started teaching us mental exercises that would hopefully allow us to notice if our own minds were being psychically tampered with. Blackstone got out of bed and buried himself in research and investigations, and Kale's DSA boys came to town. The Kale conspiracy is the flavor of the decade for all serious conspiracy theorists. Believers point out that, though not a particularly adroit politician before the event, during his term and a half as president, John Kale couldn't seem to put a political foot wrong.
Pundits nicknamed him President Infallible, and Touches Clouds, the successor he nominated and shepherded through a successful election campaign, appointed him the director of the Department of Superhuman Affairs, the agency he created while president. The DSA was a true black box agency for most conspiracy geeks. They called him the Director, and considered him Washington's secret puppet master and the source of all evil. And his evil minion was pissing me off. Miss Astra, Veritas said, looming over me, I've read the team report, and I'm asking you again, how did Artemis become involved that night? Veritas, a walking lie detector, had an annoyingly calm voice that sometimes changed intensity, but never pitch. He could even hear taped lies or lies told over the phone. His power was cosmic. He could read lies. I wondered if he spent idle moments highlighting campaign speeches. He conducted the interviews in the room where Dr. Mendel psychoanalyzed me and Lieutenant Dahmer tried to recruit me. Perhaps I should remind you, he continued, head cocked, hands on hips. The federal government has no legal jurisdiction in this case. My sole purpose here is to learn whether or not I should recommend that the local authorities look into specific aspects of last week's events. He was right. The DSA often involved itself in local superhuman on normal crimes, but only to ascertain if the superhuman in question was fairly represented, or, more often, if the local authorities needed help in their inquiries. That would change if the bill federalizing all superhuman crimes passed. We were together when the call came in. Sounded like we could use the help. And Atlas agreed to allow a known vigilante into a mission. He usually runs a tighter ship. It worked out, and she wasn't the only help we got that night. Yes, but the other help was a certified CAI member. Artemis was the help who put bullets in 7 people, 4 of them normals. I didn't say anything. Miss Astra, did Atlas give her any instructions before the riot began? Don't lie, he can taste it. To prove it, he'd started the interview with "What color is your underwear?" and called me on it when I fibbed. Jerk. He said if she encountered any villains or armed minions mixed with the costume fans, she should shoot to wound. And is that all? Yes, if she wanted them dead, they would have been. Of that I have no doubt. Thank you. The others got the same treatment, of course. Normally, Serene Chakra came out of her interview looking ready to chew glass and spit nails. Our own lawyers were asking most of the same questions, preparing for the civil lawsuits they predicted were about to fall on us. The good news was Artemis said yes, and the team accepted her on Blackstone's recommendation. The one thing Atlas insisted on was a change of sidearms. As Ajax had said, superheroes don't use guns. So he found her some ahead of the art electrolaser pistols, e-lasers. Like tasers, they stun with electricity, but used low-powered lasers to ionize a path for the current instead of wires. Very Star Trek. We immediately moved her into the dome, panda poster and all, much more secure during the day, and started the process of quietly but legally bringing her back from the dead and giving her a new public identity. Veritas surprised me by helping. He provided the CPD with the recording of his interrogation session with her, in which he carefully went over her account of her parents' deaths, making it clear that she hadn't conspired in their murder, a valid question, since she'd essentially been in hiding the whole time. The CPD accepted Veritas's affirmation of her account, freeing her of any cloud of suspicion. So now she joined my sessions in the practice range, popping away with her new e-lasers while I mastered the use of my holdouts. My ability to bury a throwing disc in the wall impressed her. I was still working on restraint. We dealt with the fallout of the Freak Zone riot as best we could, and help came from an unexpected source. Mom. The media storm still building. The invitations arrived a week after the riot. So, we all went to the ball. Alright, gang. I think I'm going to call it here. Next time, we're going to dive into Part 5 and Chapter 26. But for now, I've been really, really enjoying this, and I hope you all have managed to enjoy it as well. I think this book has a lot to say about the role of, a superhero in the superhero in a modern society, and how it relates to essentially the intermingled roles that they have to take on of equal parts celebrity and police officer, and how they might fit into the existing first responders structures that we have, and how much or how little interpersonal drama really weighs on them. Uh, Honestly, with as I'm reading this again, and as I'm remembering the broader storylines that go on, I'm really wondering how much of this is handled in the Fate game that is based on this. Um, Honestly, the more I read it, the more I'm like, I need to buy this game. I need to buy this game and find out. Like, clearly, all of these superhero classifications are like classes you can take on, and like maybe you have specific roles within the specific teams. It kind of alluded to the protector style versus the avenger style. Like, is there more to that? What's the system there? And like, I think it'd be a really great game for me personally to pick up to learn Fate, which is a system I've been meaning to learn for a long time. And I don't know, I could really carry on here, but once again, if you liked this book, it came to us by author permission, so do feel free to head down to your local library and pick up Wearing the Cape by Marion G. Harmon. Or you could go buying it, that's also an option. Either way, you're going to be supporting the author as long as you get it through the correct channels. I'd suggest your library. Technically, I think the author gets more if you do it through the library, but don't quote me on that. Either way, uh, I'd heartily suggest checking this out. And if you really like the first book, there is a whole 6-book series that I'm going to read the last 3 of probably when I'm done with this. Uh, Once again, I would like to stress that this is a podcast, so we have been recording live, and if you would like to hear edited versions of the episodes uh, that go up at a little bit of a delay, check out Paper Cuts in your favorite podcatcher. One last time here, I'm going to promote my YouTube channel, where I post all the VODs, and occasionally extra creative projects. I have scripts and concepting work done, even some storyboarding actually, which is a surprise. I usually never have ideas large enough that I need to storyboard done for some concepts. It's just a matter of getting them off the page and onto the screen. So keep an eye out for those. Did I yell about the Discord? Discord, we have a Discord. You can come yell about books I should read or talk about the books we have been reading. Come see my bread and, embroidery and stuff like that. Again, I feel like I'm just missing like one thing that I do that I just continuously have been forgetting to promote. But I think we'll just leave it on that. Do feel free to come join us. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Come back on Tuesday for likely some more Sashiko, but potentially a solo tabletop game. And Friday for the next part of this book. This has been Paper Cuts, and I hope it didn't sting.